Chapter 246. Honey, do you know that when it comes to poetry, the level of my hometown is much lower than that of the Han dynasty? I will read it to you. There was a burst of laughter and helpless dissuasion in the room. Honey, you are drunk. Have a rest, your husband is known as a good drinker. How much wine is it? Listen to me. The so-called beauty is on the other side of the water. A fair lady is a gentleman's lover. Honey, do you think it's nice? It's nice. Honey, you are really drunk, my wife, your husband is really not drunk. Your husband will prove it to you right now. Miss, why is your face red? Mammy Lee's voice came into her ears. Su Lee suddenly came to herself and touched her hot face. She pretended to be calm and went back to the room. But she quickened her pace. I'm going out. Don't let anyone know. I know. Mammy Lee laughed in her heart and quickly responded. She saw Su Lee go into the boudoir and pick up a scroll on the table stealthily. She followed Su Yun in her early years, so she could read. Her literary attainments were enough for her to be a teacher in a remote place. At this moment, when she saw the 16 words on the scroll, she couldn't help but be amazed. What a profound calligraphy attainment! What a beautiful sentence! Mammy Lee knew it was extraordinary at a glance. She couldn't put it down immediately. Such a calligraphy treasure must be kept well. It turned out that the third master of the Ling family not only pretended to be disabled, but also pretended to be a playboy. He really hid his talent. While Mammy Lee was surprised, Su Lee had changed into a simple dress and was about to leave. Mammy Lee hurriedly shouted, Miss, can I help you to frame this calligraphy? Su Lee stopped slightly. She didn't turn around, but her voice came from afar. Whatever. Mammy Lee couldn't help but chuckle. The miss was really the same as the old Mississippi. She obviously liked that man very much, but she stubbornly refused to admit it. Every time Mammy Lee saw Su Lee speak sarcastically to the third master of the Ling family, she was worried for the Mississippi. It was all thanks to the young master of the Ling family that he had a heart that was stronger than most people. No matter how young Miss rejected him, he was still like a dog's skin plaster, stubbornly pestering her. Looking at the young Miss's expression, it was obvious that she had been moved. Mammy Lee was very happy when she thought about it. She looked up and down at the calligraphy and painting in her hand. She put it down carefully and turned around to prepare the materials for mounting the calligraphy. Steward Wu, young Miss said that she wants to rest for a while. Don't disturb her. At the same time, by the riverside of the former site of the Hongyan house, Ling Li stood by the river and watched the clear river flow, which reflected the jade bone mask on his face. There were no less than 100 followers of the Yinma cult hiding around him. Looking around, there was no pedestrian. Young master, will he really come? Ling Mo wore a black and red robe, and his whole face was covered in a cloak, which made people couldn't see clearly. Even if he didn't emit his breath, his clothes were enough to make people tremble when they saw him in the martial arts circle. The leader of the Blood Tower was obviously the legendary leader of the Blood Tower. But at this moment, the killer of Shalu cult was full of strange feelings. He saw that Ling Li changed his previous plain dressing style and wore red clothes. If he didn't know the situation, he might think that Ling Li was going to get married today. Ling Mo quickly thought of the reason, because the figure of Mr. Li in cyan appeared in his mind. Ling Mo couldn't help but smile. He even cared about the color. Young master was surprisingly naive when talking about private affairs. You ask me, but who should I ask? Ling Li responded angrily. Obviously, he was not in a good mood. His performance these days. Even a stone-hearted person should be melted into molten iron. However, Su Li's heart was made of diamonds, and she didn't waver at all. Ling Mo obediently shut up. He wanted to say that maybe Miss Su Li even threw the gift box directly into the warehouse. How could she know that they were waiting for her here today? However, thinking that young master's temper was rising these days, he consciously didn't say much. In a twinkling of an eye, the sky gradually darkened. Ling Li stood by the river for 6 hours like a sculpture. Slight footsteps suddenly came. Ling Li's eyes were slightly bright, and he suddenly turned his head. His slightly surprised face immediately faded, and he couldn't help but feel disappointed. The person was not Su Li, but a kind old man in a black Taoist robe with a thin face. Third Elder. When Ling Mo saw him, he slightly bowed his head to salute. This person was a member of the Elders' Union of the Yinma cult who hadn't come out for a long time. At that time, Ling Li could ascend to the position of hierarch thanks to the help of the first elder and him. The kind old man slightly nodded as a response. He looked at Ling Li and said with a smile, "Hierarch, you have been here for a long time. Are you waiting for someone?" Ling Li slightly frowned and replied in a low voice, "It's a matter of great importance. It's better to act when it is dark. Hierarch, it's a blessing for our holy cult that you are considerate." The third elder said happily and no longer entangled in the previous problem. But he kept a thought in his mind. On the one hand, he came to Yunjing City for the safety of Ling Li, and on the other hand, he came because of the secret message of the holy girl. If Hierarch really ruined the great event of the holy cult because of his love affair, he must stop it before it happened. The sun was setting, and the night shrouded the riverside. Ling Qinglan dressed as a cyan fox and came here directly from the Supreme Judiciary. He stood aside quietly and waited for the opportunity. Today's plan was planned by him, but he didn't expect that Ling Li mobilized so many people. However, after seeing the third elder, he understood that with the help of the longevity realm, they could completely evacuate before the Dongfang family reacted. "Master, it's almost time." Ling Mo reminded him in a low voice. Ling Li suddenly came to his sense. He was full of disappointment and wanted to give orders. Suddenly, a boat came into everyone's sight in the river. The person in the bow was dressed in red gauze and wore a jade bone mask similar to Ling Li's. She floated in front of Ling Li in a blink of an eye. "You?" Ling Li's eyes were filled with surprise. He couldn't help but step forward to hold Su Li's hand. Su Li didn't resist and walked down the boat gently. "Hierarch, you even put this mask," the third elder was shocked. He was one of the most senior elders of the Yinma cult. He knew clearly what this mask represented. "Yes," Ling Li said with certainty. His black hair fluttered without wind. "I'm the hierarch, and I should choose the madam." "Third elder, do you have any objection?" "The hierarch is the supreme leader of the holy cult. I, naturally, have no objection." The third elder quickly expressed his opinion, and then hesitated, "But this matter is of great importance. Whether this person has the ability. I'm afraid I have to ask the madam to go to the elders' conference. This matter can be discussed later." "Don't be too hasty," Ling Li said, and his heart was beating fast. His hand holding Su Li was slightly sweaty. He was afraid that Su Li would slap him in the face and leave in the next moment. But Su Li seemed to be a different person when she put on the mask. No matter what Ling Li said, she remained silent. This made Ling Li happy, but he couldn't help but feel worried. Everyone started to take action. Ling Li took Su Li to sit on the hierarch's jade carriage. The gauze curtain fluttered in the night wind, like a fairyland. But the scene inside the gauze curtain was a little embarrassing. Ling Li held the soft as cream and was reluctant to let go. But Su Li was so obedient, which made him a little flustered. After the atmosphere was silent for a moment, he finally couldn't help but transmit the sound in silence. "Are you, really Su Li?" Su Li turned her head, and her eyes flashed through the mask. Ling Li unexpectedly read a little shame and annoyance in her eyes. "Do you like to hold other women's hands?" The cold words came into Ling Li's ears, and he suddenly broke into a cold sweat. God bless him. Except for Su Li, he had never had skin contact with other women. Even Ling Xian only served tea and never entered his bedroom. Subconsciously, Ling Li held her hand tighter and whispered in Su Li's ear, "Except for you, no one else." Su Li slightly raised the corner of her mouth. Ling Li glimpsed it, and she immediately giggled. Fortunately, there was a mask to cover her face. Otherwise, if her appearance was seen by the followers, they would doubt whether it was their hierarch who was sitting in the carriage now. Such details naturally couldn't escape the eyes of the third elder. He couldn't help but turn his head and sigh, "Hierarch, you should pay attention to your image." "I can't stand it." Lingley straightened up and couldn't help but laugh out loud. "Do you want me to find a good match for you?" "No, no, no." The third elder shook his head quickly and waved his hand. "I'm already half dead. Hierarch, you don't need to worry about me." While talking and laughing, the atmosphere was much relaxed, and Lingley secretly breathed a sigh of relief. If the third elder also denied Suli, things would be troublesome. He admitted that he was a little selfish. He didn't want to give up Suli and revenge. At this moment, the third elder had other thoughts in his mind. Although he couldn't see the woman's face clearly because of the mask, it didn't prevent him from peeping at her cultivation. If he couldn't see through her, there were only two results. One was that the woman's cultivation broke through the longevity realm and reached the level that he could only look up to. The second possibility was that she was immortal. Even in the spiritual circle, there was no one who broke through the longevity realm. He naturally preferred the latter. It was the most prudent thing for the hierarch to marry a wife. However, the doctrine of the hierarch was unrestrained. Even if Lingley married a mortal, he wouldn't have any opinion. However, for the sake of Lingley, he still hoped that the hierarch could marry a person in the martial arts circle. Otherwise, it would evolve into an irreversible tragedy. In the history of the hierarch, there were some hierarch who married a mortal. But how could a mortal understand the martial arts circle which was bleeding every day? Finally, because of the stupidity of the hierarch's wife, the hierarch almost destroyed the hierarch. If the hierarch hadn't come to his senses, killed his wife by himself, and finally committed suicide in front of the memorial tablets of the hierarch to apologize. All these could only be described as tragic. Hierarch, you have read the ancient books of the hierarch. Why did you jump into the fire pit? Chapter 247. At night, there were few pedestrians on the road in Yunjing City. Lingley had prepared for this. No outsider could see them on the road. In a twinkling of an eye, the carriage stopped outside a big house. Suli looked up and saw the words, "Tang's Mansion." Even in the dim moonlight, it was still shining. Prime Minister Tang's mansion. Suli was slightly shocked. Why did Lingley come here with great fanfare? The followers of the Yinma cult didn't hide their tracks. The movement outside was soon discovered by the people of Prime Minister Tang's mansion. The timid gatekeeper saw the dense crowd outside through the crack of the door. He was so scared that his face turned pale. He immediately went to report. At this moment, Ling Qinglan's disguised voice came through the wall into the mansion. It was clear and loud. "The hierarch of the hidden sacred cult is here. Why doesn't the owner of the mansion come out to meet him?" Prime Minister Tang, who had fallen asleep, was awakened. He had no time to put on his clothes. He only wore a white shirt and opened the door. The panicked gatekeeper immediately fell in and said, "Master, it's bad. There are many people in black outside. They have surrounded the mansion." Prime Minister Tang heard it, but he didn't panic. He was a senior who had experienced 2 dynasties. He was calm in the face of danger. He called the butler and said, "Hurry up. Arrange Madam and others to leave through the secret passage." The butler smiled bitterly and said, "Master, the secret passage suddenly collapsed a few days ago. It is being repaired. Now even a sparrow can't get out, let alone Madam and others." "What?" Prime Minister Tang was horrified. His lips couldn't help trembling. "When did it collapse? Why didn't you tell me before it was so important?" The butler was puzzled and said, "Isn't it your order to repair the secret passage?" "How?" Prime Minister Tang's body trembled violently and he couldn't stop staggering. If the housekeeper hadn't come forward to help him, he would have fallen down. "Master, the butler looked worried. Prime Minister Tang waved his hand weakly and sighed, I'm fine. Open the door to welcome the distinguished guests. Yes, master. The butler ran to the door anxiously. Prime Minister Tang followed him slowly. He was expressionless. Obviously, they came prepared. In this case, it was a blessing, not a curse. If it was a curse, they couldn't avoid it, so there was no need to struggle. Boom boom, the tall and heavy door was pushed open by the two gatekeepers, producing a heavy sound that was unusually ear-piercing in the quiet night. Seeing this scene, Ling Li waved his hand, and the man who carried the jade chariot immediately walked in. Ling Mo and Ling Qinglan were on each side of the chariot. Prime Minister Tang was shocked by such a situation. The two red figures on the carriage were covered by a curtain, so he couldn't see them clearly. But the people on both sides of the carriage were easy to recognize. They were two generals of the Yinma cult, Qinghu and Xuelo. There was no need to guess who was qualified to sit in the carriage. The hierarch of the Yinma cult, Child Li. I am Prime Minister Tang. Greetings, Sect Leader Li. Prime Minister Tang said and was about to kneel down with the help of the butler. The hierarch of a big sect was no less than the king of a country like Dongfang Shao. It was not inappropriate for him to kneel down to greet him. Haha, hearty laughter came from the chariot, and a gentle voice sounded, Mr. Tang, you don't have to be so polite. It would be bad if Dongfang Shao misunderstood you. Hearing this, Su Li's eyes flickered, and she seemed to understand something. Prime Minister Tang found that there was a force under his knees when he was kneeling halfway. He couldn't kneel down no matter how hard he tried. He immediately straightened up, but he was inexplicably frightened. He was not afraid of Child Li's martial force, but his intention. So many people of the Yinma cult appeared in the Tang mansion. If there were no casualties in the Tang mansion, the Dongfang family would know about it. According to Dongfang Zhao's suspicious character, how could the Tang mansion end well? The expression change on Prime Minister Tang's face couldn't escape Ling Li's eyes. He still laughed, and a slightly flat voice came into Prime Minister Tang's ears, it seems that Mr. Tang is a sensible person. I don't want to keep you guessing. This king has come here personally to inquire about something. If old Mister's answer can satisfy this king, perhaps I can guarantee the safety of your Tang residence. Prime Minister Tang snorted and said in a low voice, you set me up like this. How can I trust your sect? No. Mr. Tang misunderstood. Ling Li stretched out his hand and waved. Ling Mo immediately rushed into the backyard with people in Prime Minister Tang's frightened look. After a scream of fear, all the womenfolk of the Tang mansion were gathered in the front yard. They were controlled by the Yinma cult and shivered. Among them, Tang Lei was the one who shook the most. His fat shook quite rhythmically. The teenager next to him, who seemed to be 1 or 2 years younger than Tang Lei, was not much better. Although he tried to maintain a gloomy and calm face, his face was pale like a piece of paper. Su Li covered her mouth and chuckled. She thought that if Tang Lei continued to shake like this, he might lose a lot of fat. This time, Ling Li accurately grasped Prime Minister Tang's weakness, so there was no possibility of failure. Therefore, in Prime Minister Tang's view, Hierarch Li seemed to be a devil who killed people without blinking. But in fact, Ling Li would not kill anyone. The third elder had been paying attention to Su Li's movements. Seeing that she could still laugh, he was a little relieved. Although this woman was immortal, she was indeed extraordinary. It was the best for the holy cult that she could accept the fighting and killing in the martial arts circle. Prime Minister Tang's face was pale. He scolded himself for being stupid. He even tried to trust a devil. It didn't matter if he died alone. But all the lineal relatives of the Tang mansion were here. If they were really killed by the Yinma cult, the Tang family would be dead. How could he explain to the ancestors of the Tang family after he died? Soon, Prime Minister Tang gave up the inner struggle and relaxed. He accepted his fate and said, Hierarch Li, what do you want to ask? Mr. Tang, you are really sensible. Ling Li praised and then asked, 14 years ago, you were the minister of the Ministry of Penalty. So, you should know a lot about the extermination of the Yi family. When Prime Minister Tang heard 14 years ago, his face immediately changed. The words, Minister of the Ministry of Penalty, and Yi family, were taboo for him. Tang Lei looked at Prime Minister Tang in confusion. His grandfather used to be the Minister of the Ministry of Penalty. Why didn't he know? This matter should have nothing to do with your cult. Why are you interested in a matter that happened 14 years ago? Prime Minister Tang took a deep breath and managed to calm down. I don't need a reason to do things. Even if I have a reason, you are not qualified to inquire about it. So, it's wise to tell me who killed the Yi family while I am in a good mood. Ling Li's words were extremely arrogant. It was obvious that he didn't take anyone in the Tang mansion seriously. The teenager beside Tang Lei was so angry that he even forgot his fear. But his reason told him that it was better not to talk back. Ling Li was indeed qualified to be arrogant. Prime Minister Tang was silent and fell into endless struggle. Ling Li stopped Ling Qinglan from asking questions several times. He waited slowly. At this time, he couldn't be anxious. If the people in the Tang mansion found out, they couldn't ask anything. Prime Minister Tang's expression changed. From time to time, he looked at his wife and children who were full of hope. But if he said it and Dongfang Shao knew it, the Tang family couldn't escape death. Besides, they would be engraved with the crime of treason, which would bring shame to the family. Mr. Tang, you have to think clearly. If you don't say it, you will also be regarded as a thorn in the side of the Dongfang family. If I add fuel to the fire, you can imagine the result. If you say it, the result will be completely different. Ling Li continued to persuade Prime Minister Tang patiently. This sentence was exactly what Prime Minister Tang wanted. That was right. The Dahan country had been infiltrated by the Yinma cult for a long time. If the Yinma cult took advantage of today's event to publicize it, all the vows he made in front of Dongfang Shao would be invalid. The Tang family was not the retainer of the Dongfang family. He just kept his mouth shut to save his life. Now, did he want to keep the secret and go to hell? I will say it. After saying it, Prime Minister Tang seemed to put down a heavy burden, and the wrinkles on his face were stretched out. He said, I believe that Hierarch Li, who is famous in the martial arts circle, will not deceive me. Prime Minister Tang is really sensible. Ling Li chuckled and signaled Ling Mo. Ling Mo immediately understood and took all the women and children of the Tang family back to the backyard to guard. At the same time, he also took Su Li's hand and got off the jade carriage. Their red clothes were like fire. They looked like a couple who had just gotten married. It turns out that Hierarch's wife is also here. I'm really scared. Prime Minister Tang was surprised and quickly saluted. It was said that Child Li had no wife in Jianghu. In this way, he was the first outsider to know this information. He couldn't help but feel a sense of honor. Su Li nodded slightly to return the salute. Prime Minister Tang's indifferent reaction was expected. The third elder also nodded secretly. It was rare for an ordinary person of the Dahan country to be so calm in front of the Prime Minister of the country. He believed that even if she met Dongfang Shao, what she did would not bring shame to the cult. She was worthy of the title of the hostess of the holy cult. Soon, Prime Minister Tang, Ling Li and Su Li sat in the front hall. Except for Ling Qinglan who stood behind Ling Li to listen, Ling Mo and the third elder didn't come in. They just guarded outside the door in case of accidents. Hierarch Li and Madam are really in love with each other. Prime Minister Tang saw that Ling Li was unwilling to let go of his hand inside. He was a little too relaxed at the moment and didn't have much fear in front of the notorious devil. Ling Li coughed and acquiesced to what Prime Minister Tang said. He didn't dare to see Su Li's reaction and changed the topic. Mr. Tang, let's talk about the Yi family. Okay. Chapter 248. At that time, I just became the minister of the Ministry of Penalty. Although I had the support of my family, I was enthusiastic and wanted to reorganize the laws of Dahan country. But the case of the Yi family made it impossible for me to realize my dream. Prime Minister Tang recalled what happened in those years and felt sorry now. Hierarchically, although I don't know why you are interested in a family in Dahan country, I'm sorry to tell you that I don't know much about the fire of the Ministry of Penalty, but, Mr. Tang, don't keep me guessing. My time is precious. Let's get to the point. Ling Li said lightly, but he was worried as Su Li and Ling Qinglan. They all knew that what he was going to say next was the highlight. The case of the extermination of the Yi family is really full of doubts. Prime Minister Tang didn't say any more nonsense and said directly, all the members of the Yi family were killed with one blow. And the way of death was not the same. The murderer was not one person. It was more like an organization full of discipline. I'm not afraid to blame you, but I thought you did it at first. Prime Minister Tang stared at Ling Li's reaction, but he didn't see any clue. Ling Li chuckled, which was quite harsh on Prime Minister Tang's ears. Although I'm not a good person, the Yi family has never had anything to do with our cult before. Why should I kill the Holy Family? Ling Li's tone was full of disdain, but he said it clearly. Although Prime Minister Tang was old, he still had the ability to distinguish the truth. He was silent for a moment and suddenly said, in fact, General Yi Qing and I were old friends. Ling Qinglan held his breath and subconsciously clenched his fists. It was the first time for him to hear the name of his grandfather from others in 14 years. Back then, General Yi Qing was General Ling's most valued right-hand man. He was indeed extremely intelligent and his brain worked extremely fast. General Ling would always ask for his opinion on all the major and minor decisions in the military camp. It could be said that although Yi Qing was only a deputy general, he played an incomparably important role as a military advisor in the camp. Ling Li also looked serious. There was very little information about his grandfather and father in his mind, so he didn't know the situation in the military camp at that time. Before the assassination, he didn't really regard himself as a member of the Ling family. Therefore, he pretended while concentrating on practicing, thinking about how to return to the earth. Now, with his constant exploration and understanding of the world, he had long given up the idea of returning to the earth. According to the scientific theory on the earth, this place might not be the same space as the earth. No matter how he practiced, it was impossible for him to break the plane and go back. Ling Li was distracted. Prime Minister Tang continued to say, I had an encounter with Yi Qing, and later, we became bosom friends. Yi Qing, Li Yi Qing and I had a close relationship with him. Of Yi of world. Tang I of world. Yi Qing and Tang of Tang Tang were Li at Qing and of Li, Li of Tang Li, Qing, Li, Prime Dynasty, Tang Prime said. Ling Li was touched, and his eyebrows twitched. He suddenly said in a cold tone, is the extermination of the Yi family really related to the Ling family? Prime Minister Tang was slightly startled. He nodded and then shook his head. It seems that Hierarch is a wise man. However, this old man is only guessing. After all, the deaths of the Ling family men are too strange. Since the extermination of the Yi family, the Ling family has been in danger again and again. In the following 6 years, General Ling and the eldest son of the Ling family died one after another. Finally, the second son of the Ling family died. I am also curious. If the power of the Ling family is really reduced, why not eliminate Ling Ping? Leaving the useless third master, the Ling family naturally can't make waves. The older the ginger, the spicier it is. Old Mr. Tang's eyes are as sharp as a torch. Although Ling Li's words were compliments, Prime Minister Tang couldn't hear any emotion of praise, as if there were only ice in Ling Li's words without any personal feelings. His heart couldn't help but shiver slightly, and his brain began to work. Anyone would speak with emotion, and the disdain and arrogance in this cult Master Li's words could be counted as well. Now that he suddenly had no emotion, he was naturally suppressing something. But even if he noticed the abnormality, he couldn't guess the relationship between the hierarch of the Yinma cult and the Ling family with this clue. Hierarch, you flatter me. Prime Minister Tang didn't dare to ask for credit. He knew that Ling Li didn't really praise him, so he immediately continued, "Not long before the extermination of the Yi family, I had a private meeting with Yi Qing to drink. At that time, I noticed that he was worried and his whole state was not right. I asked him again and again, but he didn't say anything. Finally, I don't know if he was drunk, he suddenly told me that he found a big secret." Ling Li raised his eyebrows and asked, "What secret?" I also asked him at that time, but he soon came to his senses and seemed to regret spilling the beans. Then he kept silent and only said that he would tell me the details after it was done. Later, the Yi family was exterminated. Prime Minister Tang was full of regret. He still remembered that Yi Qing was very hesitant at that time. If he insisted on it, maybe he could know what the secret was. Unfortunately, Yi Qing was dead, and no one would know the secret forever. After talking for so long, is old Mr. Tang trying to say that's all he knows? Ling Qinglan said coldly. He was full of expectation, but Prime Minister Tang told him this. He was disappointed and angry because he was teased by Prime Minister Tang. "Lord Qinghu, please calm down." Prime Minister Tang knew the current situation. He fell from the chair without dignity and knelt on the ground. Later. The most important thing is after the extermination of the Yi family. Come on, Qinghu, don't scare the old man. If he is scared, who can I ask for help? Ling Li waved his hand. It seemed that he was reprimanding him, but in fact, he was warning Ling Qinglan to be more calm at this time. Ling Qinglan took a deep breath, relaxed and stopped talking. "Well, go on," Ling Li said carelessly. He held Su Li's right hand in his palm and gently rubbed it. It seemed that his attention was not on the information at all. Prime Minister Tang didn't dare to neglect and immediately began to talk about the key points. "At that time, I saw a lot of firewood and kerosene around the Yi family. I knew that the murderers must want to burn the corpses. So, I immediately decided to transport all the corpses to the Ministry of Penalty overnight and check Yi Qing's body in person." Su Li's eyes flashed with light. Her only confidant and friend died in front of her. It was hard to imagine how Prime Minister Tang calmed down quickly and made a decision. Although the old man gave up his dignity in order to protect his family, which was a bit humble, it didn't prevent her from admiring him. Yi Qing was disfigured after his death. It's hard to tell anything from his expression. His lips and teeth were broken, and his fingers were broken. He died very painfully. Prime Minister Tang's voice changed a little. It seemed that he recalled the tragedy of that year. Someone tortured him, wanting to know something. If I'm not mistaken, his entire family was annihilated because of that secret. I wanted to go to the original site of the Yi family to investigate at that time, but the Ministry of Penalty suddenly caught fire. I was also attacked from behind and fainted. When I woke up, I was already in my own home. All the corpses of the Yi family were burned into charcoal. It was impossible to tell who was who. Even half of the warehouse where the files were stored was burned. Countless officers of the Ministry of Penalty also died. Prime Minister Tang lowered his head in pain. Such a big accident had never happened since the founding of the Dahan country. When I received the news at that time, I thought it was over. I couldn't bear such a big crime. Maybe the whole Tang family would be killed. Then, the next day, I received a secret summon from the Imperial Palace. Su Li's eyes wandered. 14 years ago, the emperor of the Dahan country was still Dongfang Shao. At that time, Dongfang Shao had just pacified the civil strife in the Imperial Palace for less than 2 years. His behavior was very radical. I went to the Imperial Palace with the thought of losing my head, but I saw an emperor with a kind smile. Thinking of the emperor, Prime Minister Tang still shuddered. He promised me that as long as I kept the matter of the Yi family in my heart forever, the fire of the Ministry of Penalty would not be investigated. Besides, my traces in the Ministry of Penalty would also be erased, and I would have a bright career. So, you agreed? Ling Qinglan's voice was cold, even with a hint of killing intent. Although in that case, anyone would agree in order to save his life, he was a member of the Yi family. He was destined not to consider Prime Minister Tang's feelings. Surprisingly, Prime Minister Tang shook his head. Yi Qing is my only confidant. Although my life was in danger, still hesitated at that time. Prime Minister Tang looked calm. What he said at the moment was true, so he naturally had a clear conscience. My hesitation was not a good thing in Dongfang Zhao's eyes. He quickly issued an order, an inhumane order. Prime Minister Tang's voice became bitter. He caught all the people of the Tang family who worked in the Ministry of Penalty. Every time I hesitated for a quarter of an hour, someone would be beheaded. Ling Qinglan was finally moved. He restrained his killing intent and faintly felt a little guilty. If Prime Minister Tang really struggled for the Yi family would be indebted to him. But he just wanted to kill Prime Minister Tang. Dongfang Zhao didn't give me much time. He said a quarter of an hour, but the eunuch immediately caught someone and beheaded him. Prime Minister Tang looked ferocious. I almost rushed to fight with him, but the eunuch caught Lei and pressed him on the guillotine. Ling Li narrowed his eyes slightly. Tang Lei was the same age as him, which meant that Tang Lei was just a 2-year-old baby at that time. The silly boy was about to die, but he could still smile when he looked at the eunuch who caught him. Prime Minister Tang scolded, but his voice couldn't stop trembling. He shouted crazily, "He is my first grandson. I want to hold him in my palm. How can I bear that he just came to this world and go back to the underworld?" Chapter 249. With Prime Minister Tang's last words, the front hall fell into silence for a long time. Everyone had their own thoughts and no one spoke. Su Li looked at Prime Minister Tang, who knelt on the ground and expressed his true feelings. She was deep in thought. Tang Lei was not favored by Prime Minister Tang at all. Otherwise, how could he develop such a cowardly character? He lived in the Ling mansion for several months, but no one cared about the Tang mansion. But in this case, Prime Minister Tang would not lie. Ling Li and Ling Qinglan could also think of what Su Li thought. They talked for a while, and Ling Qinglan stood up and asked, "Mr. Tang, you claim that you love your eldest grandson, but I don't have to investigate to know that your eldest grandson has never been favored since he was a child. He was even left to fend for himself outside. Only your second son has been raised carefully and is regarded as the future heir of the Tang family. Don't you feel that it is contradictory?" Ho ho, Prime Minister Tang gave a wry smile and was not surprised to hear this question. "Lord Qinghu, I am relieved to hear that. Since you didn't find any clue, the royal family should not either. I painstakingly put Lei out of my sight. I just hope that he can continue to live after I die. If I may be so bold as to ask, is your wife still alive?" Su Li suddenly asked. Although she used a falsetto voice, her tone was still pleasant. Prime Minister Tang subconsciously imagined a beautiful woman's face in his mind. "You are so polite. I'm really flattered." It seemed that Prime Minister Tang was relieved after telling everything. No matter what he said at this moment, he seemed calm. Madam Sect Master's guess is correct. Ever since that year, my wife and daughter-in-law's health deteriorated year by year. In the end, they passed away one after another. Shortly after that, Dongfang Zhao sent several successors to me. Although I had some guesses at that time, I didn't dare to think deeply. I even abandoned myself to despair. I had already surrendered once, so what if I was weak again? Later, Tang Ping was born. After that, Lei's situation was getting worse. I couldn't take him with me all the time, so I could only reduce my attention to him so that he could live. Su Li sneered, "You are so naive. Do you think that if you take a step back, Dongfang Zhao will give your Tang family more opportunities?" Prime Minister Tang was shocked and asked in a trembling voice, "What do you mean? How can you understand my wife's meaning?" "Prime Minister Tang, why are you deceiving yourself?" Ling Li stared at Ling Li's side face. There was only tenderness and affection in his eyes, but his tone was cold and hard. "The backyard of your Tang family has been nibbled away by Dongfang Zhao. Although some of your sons are still alive, none of them is an official in the imperial court. It can be said that as long as you die, your sense of existence in the imperial court will fade away, and your wife will immediately destroy your Tang family. How is this possible? No matter what, they have already stepped through the door of my Tang family and are members of my Tang family. Prime Minister Tang's eyes were full of disbelief. He suddenly stood up and retorted. His neck became red because of the rapid ups and downs of his emotions. So, Mr. Tang, you are really naive. Ling Li waved his hand and pulled Su Li to get up and leave the front hall. He said lightly, finally, I would like to remind you that the first child of your mansion has been poisoned for several years. This poison causes him to be fat and slow in thinking. He has become a waste. That's all I have to say. Take care of yourself, Mr. Tang. Then, Ling Li and Su Li disappeared from the gate of the Ling family and returned to the jade carriage. Before Prime Minister Tang recovered from the shock, he saw that Ling Qinglan walked a few steps out and then turned back and said, Mr. Tang, don't worry about the exposure. People within 10 miles around the Tang family are sleeping soundly. Even if there is an explosion in 6 hours, they will not wake up. Mr. Tang only spent a little more than 2 hours. Naturally, you don't have to worry about it. Prime Minister Tang stared blankly at the Yinma cult's followers retreating silently like ghosts and soon disappeared in the empty street. Master! Master, are you all right? A group of people came into the backyard. Prime Minister Tang looked at his second wife who was 20 years younger than him expressionlessly and didn't speak. Although the woman was over 40 years old, she was well maintained and looked only over 30 years old. She was Tang Ping's biological mother, Dongfang Wan. Master, is everything okay in the Tang family? I heard that a thief broke into the Prime Minister's house. How dare he steal from the Prime Minister's house? Dongfang Wan looked indignant, but her words made Prime Minister Tang confused. They all saw the hierarch of the Yinma cult just now. Why did they all seem to have lost their memories? Although confused, Prime Minister Tang had lived for 60 or 70 years, so he was shrewd. He immediately suppressed his thoughts and nodded slightly, it's okay. Although we didn't catch the thief, nothing was lost in the Tang family. Go back to sleep. Yes, Master. The crowd gradually dispersed. Tang Ping glanced at Tang Lei who was still in a daze. He sneered and said with concern, Grandpa, you should also have an early rest. Prime Minister Tang shook his head, it's almost time for the morning court. You can have a rest when you come back. You are 16 or 17 years old, and you are growing up. You can leave now. Tang Ping was satisfied with Prime Minister Tang's concern. He glanced at Tang Lei arrogantly and immediately left the front hall. After Tang Ping left, there was only Tang Lei in the room. Facing his grandfather alone, Tang Lei was scared. He lowered his head and shrank his neck, just like a fat ostrich. Prime Minister Tang was sad in his heart, but he pretended to be disgusted and reprimanded, Bastard. You have been fooling around outside recently. Do you want to abandon your home? The sudden reprimand made Tang Lei confused. He couldn't help but feel wronged, I didn't. How dare you quibble? Prime Minister Tang grabbed Tang Lei's ear and walked to the study. Grandpa, be gentle. It hurts. The maid who peeped outside the door saw this scene and laughed in her heart. She quickly left the front hall and ran to the backyard. The light in the study flickered. Tang Lei knelt on the ground in fear and didn't dare to breathe. Prime Minister Tang sat in the chair without saying a word, but he was shocked in his heart. The Yinma cult could erase people's memories. It was terrible. He finally understood what Qinghu meant by no worries. Originally, he was worried that Dongfang Wan would secretly inform the royal family, but now it was impossible. Grandpa. Tang Lei's feet were numb after kneeling for a long time. He couldn't help but ask, Grandpa, is the person who came tonight, shut up? Prime Minister Tang's face suddenly changed. He looked at Tang Lei in surprise and doubt. Did the method of erasing memories fail? The embark cult was meticulous and should not miss anything. Tang Lei covered his mouth with his hands and was frightened. He didn't dare to speak again. Prime Minister Tang's fierceness really scared him. You, come with me. With a sigh, Prime Minister Tang got up and walked to the bedroom. Tang Lei followed him nervously. He saw that his grandpa turned a switch under the bed. The place where the wardrobe was moved, revealing an entrance to a secret room. Tang Lei was shocked. How could there be such a place in his grandpa's bedroom? What are you waiting for? Come in. Prime Minister Tang's voice came. Tang Lei hurriedly said, "Oh," and walked in. Because the door was too small, his huge body was almost embedded in the door frame. Prime Minister Tang shook his head. Now that he knew the secret of his eldest grandson being fat, he certainly wouldn't blame him as before. After Tang Lei came in, Prime Minister Tang turned the switch, and the bookcase was closed quietly. At the same time, Prime Minister Tang also lit the oil lamp. Grandpa, what is this place? Tang Lei was curious. He was surprised to find that the lines on his grandpa's face softened. He only saw the kind eyes of his grandpa when he looked at Tang Ping. Lei, you have grown up. I don't want to hide many things from you. Prime Minister Tang sighed and told Tang Ping the secrets hidden in his heart these years. Tang Lei opened his mouth and couldn't close it for a long time. Did his grandpa take the wrong medicine? Or was he making up a story? Why did he feel it was not true at all? However, when he heard that his mother and his grandmother had died mysteriously one after another, his expression was no longer as relaxed as it was before. It slowly became gloomy, and he fell into a long silence. Lei, I am useless. I don't know when the royal family will kill me. You are the only hope of our Tang family. You must live well. Prime Minister Tang gently patted his grandson's fat shoulder and said, Tonight, I will take you to see a doctor. The hierarch of the embark cult didn't erase your memory. I also realized that he had known that I would take you to detoxify the poison. Now it saves me a lot of trouble. Grandpa, I am fine. Tang Lei smirked, which made people feel sorry for him. He said, I have found a doctor who can detoxify the poison. What? Prime Minister Tang was shocked. He thought that his grandson had been kept in the dark, but it turned out that he was the last one to know it. I have wronged you before. It's really a sin. Tang Lei's eyes were clear. Since Suli suppressed the poison in his body, he thought a lot during this time and was no longer as stupid as before. No matter how slow your grandson's body is, if I'm about to die, I'll still be able to feel something. Thinking of the beautiful figure in the affiliated school of the National Academy, Tang Lei's fat face showed great gratitude. He said, in fact, a few months ago, I felt that my physical strength declined sharply. I was out of breath after a few steps. Later, by chance, a great doctor suppressed the poison with an elixir. I have always wondered why that doctor didn't detoxify the poison in my body since she could easily suppress it. Later, I realized that she was afraid of alerting the enemy and killing me. Chapter 250. Prime Minister Tang was shocked when he heard Tang Lei's bold words. In his impression, his eldest grandson had always been a yes-man, overcautious and timid in everything he did, but it turned out that it was not Tang Lei's true temperament. After figuring it out, Prime Minister Tang couldn't help but laugh and said, Lei, what you said today really broadened my horizons. You didn't lose the face of our Tang family. Tang Lei scratched his head embarrassedly and said with a smile, I'm just telling the truth. I've been blinded these years. It's not too late for me to be enlightened by you. Prime Minister Tang's old face was a little more relaxed and relieved. Don't worry about it. Continue to contact the doctor and let him detoxify you. Then live in the Ling family and never come back. I know what to do with the embark cult. Prime Minister Tang was anxious and said, Grandpa, you must not take risks. Prime Minister Tang shook his head and said with a smile, if I want to win a glimmer of vitality for the Tang family, how can I not take risks? Don't worry. I want to see a great-grandson. I won't take risks easily. Tang Lei was a little relieved when he heard it. His ears suddenly turned red and he said shyly, I'm so fat. How can a girl like me, after you detoxify, lose weight for me? Yes, Grandpa. Tang Lei nodded hurriedly. At this moment, his heart was warmer than ever. In the night, Prime Minister Tang watched his eldest grandson leave. His eyes full of vicissitudes immediately became cold and full of determination. He was confused and ruined the future of the Tang family. If it wasn't for the visit of the Yinma cult tonight, he might not realize it until the news of Tang Lei's death came. Ancestors, I'm willing to go to hell to suffer after death. Ancestors, please bless me. I'll use my life to seek a glimmer of vitality for Lei. Nothing happened that night. The first glimmer of light in the morning shone on the earth. Fang Yuan opened the attic on the top floor with a broom as usual and was about to go in to clean. But when he saw the woman in red lying on the soft mattress in the room, he immediately froze and didn't know what to do. When the purple qi came from the east, why didn't you seize the time to cultivate? Why did you come to my house? Su Li suddenly opened her eyes. Although Fang Yuan's steps were light, she found it at the first time. Hearing that, Fang Yuan showed a rare embarrassment on his face. He explained in a low voice, I have too many distracting thoughts, so I want to clean it. Have you always cleaned this room yourself? An unknown light flashed through Su Li's eyes, and Fang Yuan's silent heart immediately beat faster. He didn't know how to answer. Could he tell her that he had snatched this job from his sister's hands and had been laughed at for a few days? Forget it. I haven't had many opportunities to fight recently. You've indeed been cultivating too much. It's best if you can find your own way to relax. She no longer entangled in the previous problem, or, she didn't want to entangle. There was a hint of sadness in Fang Yuan's eyes, but he soon recovered his usual calmness. He didn't let Su Li see any clue. He took the broom and went down. Although his back was straight, he still showed some loneliness. A strange feeling flashed through Su Li's eyes. Fang Yuan's intention couldn't be more obvious, but unfortunately, shaking her head slightly to get rid of distracting thoughts, Su Li took out the full moon and heartstrings from her arms. The shell of the full moon and heartstrings had been removed. At this moment, it had completely melted in the glass bottle. Its color was no longer golden, but it was as clear as the sky, like blood. The way to use the full moon and heartstrings had been handed down. It was directly refined on the night of the full moon. But there was a more powerful way hidden in her heart. The ancient method of refining the mind. The shape of the full moon and heartstrings was like Jindan. Ordinary people naturally wanted to refine the whole thing. But later generations found that a layer of golden clothes on the surface of this spiritual object would suppress the effect of the full moon and heartstrings, and then it couldn't promote a higher level of the Zifu. It could be said that the full moon and heartstrings without the golden clothes was the real rare spiritual object. After peeling off the golden clothes, the core liquid of the full moon and heartstrings was milky white. Su Li chose the first day of the first lunar month, at midnight, when the power of the moonlight was the weakest, to add 10 drops of her essence blood into it, so that the milky white liquid immediately turned into sky blue. The so-called essence blood was the essence of a warrior, which was extremely important. If a warrior lost a lot of essence blood at once, it was likely to lead to the decline of his cultivation, and even his life would be in danger. A warrior of the inborn realm had no more than 100 drops of essence blood. Su Li forced out 1/10 of it at once. It could be imagined how great the cost was. Looking at the thing in the bottle, Su Li didn't dare to be distracted. In order to refine this thing, she didn't hesitate to lower her cultivation. She had just reached the 8th hurdle of the inborn realm, but now she returned to the 7th hurdle of the inborn realm. There was only one chance, and she must not fail. Putting the glass bottle where the sun shone, Su Li got up and walked to the door. She moved 2 large vases to block the door. The tactical matrix was set up. Unless when Tingshan forced it, no one could open the whole Linli building. Wen Tingshan was not a stupid person. What's more, after the auction, the people of the Wanjian sect didn't move for a long time. He finally couldn't help but set off to the Qinghe province to find Ning Qing, so that Su Li could refine the full moon and heartstrings without any accident. The time was getting closer and closer. Su Li looked dignified and her forehead was slightly sweating. The enemies of the Wanjian sect, Dongfang Shao, the Hehuan sect and the Lianshi cult were getting stronger and stronger. She had no time to fail. The quiet waiting lasted for 5 minutes. Suddenly, a visible lavender pneuma floated from the nothingness and instantly integrated into the glass bottle. Su Li's eyes were full of surprise and joy. It turned out to be the power of extreme yang. Crack! The heat wave hit, and the glass bottle broke as expected. Then it tended to melt. The sky blue liquid in the bottle became flame-like golden, and in the blink of an eye, it tended to become black. Su Li's pupils shrank slightly. Without saying anything, she directly cupped the pool of gelatinous fiery red in her hands. Then her expression changed slightly. She looked at her right hand, which was wrapped by the inborn genuine energy. It was scorched black and emitted bursts of meat fragrance. In just an instant, he was roasted. In the next moment, Su Li made a decision and swallowed the fiery red thing. It was no less than swallowing magma with flesh and blood. In the blink of an eye, Su Li felt that the pipeline from her throat to her stomach was burned through, and then an unimaginable pain came from her stomach. Even a wisp of the power of the sun could not be borne by a mortal body. If there was no special way to deal with it, Su Li would be burned into a charcoal black corpse in less than 5 minutes. The more critical the moment was, the calmer Su Li appeared. Before using this method, she knew that it was extremely dangerous. Now everything was still within her expectation. The secret method that she had practiced for thousands of times emerged in her mind. She immediately ran all the strength in her body. Although the injury was very terrible, fortunately, only the respiratory tract and esophagus were destroyed, and only 20% of the tendons and vessels were destroyed. So, the secret method was running smoothly. Soon, the genuine energy was transformed into a kind of gentle power, which slowly wrapped the source of the golden color. The heat in the body faded away, and the outstanding recovery ability of the Ghost Valley meditation direction played a role. His cracked and blood-red lips regained their moisture at a speed visible to the naked eye. His hair, which was as dry as withered grass, regained its smoothness like ink. The hole in his body was recovering slowly, but it was still recovering. Finally, it's over. Su Li looked inside her body, which was slowly healing a few black holes, but she dared not to be careless. The danger of practicing the ancient method of refined mind was more than that, although she felt that she was almost roasted just now. In the pubic region, the gentle power was constantly wearing down the power of the sun, and it was decomposed into countless small parts, which were transported to every part of Su Li's tendons and vessels. Su Li felt as if she was soaking in a hot spring, and her whole body was warm. This feeling lasted for a long time. The golden color of the full moon and heartstrings faded away, and it became the previous blue again. But this time, it was not sky blue, but deep blue. Without warning, an extremely horrible chill suddenly broke out, which easily broke through the gentle mysterious energy and instantly swept Su Li's whole body. Kacha, Kacha! If someone walked into the room now, he could see that Su Li's whole body was covered with a layer of frost, and the ice was thickening at a very fast speed. In the blink of an eye, even Su Li's face could not be seen clearly. At this moment, the rising sun outside the window happened to shine on Su Li, who was sitting on the ground with her legs crossed. The power of the sun in the daytime broke out, and immediately suppressed the power of the moon. The ice and snow melted quickly, and Su Li returned to normal. But her expression was still stiff, as if she was frozen to death. As time went by, Fang Yuan and others came to knock on the door, but there was no response. They were worried and wanted to break the door by force, but they found that the wooden door was as heavy as a boulder, and they could not push it open at all. Finally, they could only helplessly wait outside the door, and they couldn't help worrying. Although Su Li's words of, just making a deal, were still vivid in their ears, as if it were yesterday, people's hearts were revealed after a long time. They had already experienced Su Li's temperament of being sharp-tongued but soft-hearted. At this moment, the situation in the room was shocking. The sun could not shine on the position where Su Li was sitting, but there was a halo around her body, which was clearly the power of the sun. Time passed slowly. When the last trace of the power of the sun faded in the west, Su Li, who was like an ice sculpture, suddenly opened her eyes, and then she could no longer maintain the posture of sitting cross-legged. She lay on the ground and gasped for breath. She stared at the white water marks on the ground that had already dried up, and her eyes were full of fear. She underestimated the power of the extreme yin contained in the full moon and heartstrings. This time, if there was no power of the sun that had been helping her, she would have been frozen to death at the moment when the chill broke out. But even so, she did not want to recall the process of refining the full moon and heartstrings. It was as difficult as a drowning child coming ashore alone in a drowning lake to struggle between ice and fire, and to keep sober to refine the full moon and heartstrings. It was really a nightmare. Fortunately, the suffering was over, and it was time to check the harvest. While sighing, Su Li felt that she had recovered a lot of strength. She sat up again and looked inside her pubic region. The liquid genuine energy was rippling in the center of the pubic region like a lake. The quality and quantity of the lake had increased by more than 3 times. She ran the genuine energy slightly and couldn't help but be surprised. The inborn 9th hurdle. After refining the full moon and heartstrings for only 1 day, she directly skipped the inborn 8th hurdle and reached the inborn 9th hurdle. There was no bottleneck from the inborn 9th hurdle to the extreme of the inborn realm. In addition, there was still a lot of residual efficacy in her body. She could reach the peak in 1 month at most. One step further was the realm that the martial arts circle and the secular world looked up to, the longevity realm. Su Li's eyes flashed with a light. Such a risk didn't let her down after all. Originally, if she wanted to break through the longevity realm, she needed to take advantage of the rich nimbus environment of the spiritual circle, and she also needed to condense the embryonic form of her own immortal house to salvage the foundation. But now she didn't need it after refining the full moon and heartstrings with the ancient method. Looking inside with her psychic awareness, Su Li could see a little purple light flashing above her pubic region. That was the foundation of the immortal house. The power of the full moon and heartstrings wandered all over her body, and it would take some time for the immortal house to form. During this time, Su Li raised her right hand, and a little moonlight immediately sprinkled from the nothingness. The power of moonlight. The ancients didn't believe in her. Su Li was very happy. The fundamental purpose of refining the full moon and heartstrings with the ancient method was to master the ability to absorb the power of moonlight. The power of moonlight was everywhere and endless. On the night of the full moon, it would form a terrible tide of moonlight. Now she could absorb the spiritual power and the power of moonlight for her own use at the same time. She didn't need to worry about the energy and the immortal house. In the future, there would be no obstacle to break through the longevity realm. It is said that the shape of the immortal house of each warrior is different. I don't know what my immortal house will become. Su Li muttered to herself. If she refined the full moon and heartstrings on the night of the full moon, the immortal house would exist in the shape of the moon. Although the spherical shape had good defense, it was not a perfect shape. After refining the full moon and heartstrings with the ancient method, the shape of the immortal house would return to chaos. The shape of the immortal house depended on personal luck. No one could tell what the shape of Su Li's immortal house would be in the future. Su Li, can you hear me? Su Li, are you okay? Outside the door, Yin Xuedong and others heard Su Li's vague words. They immediately stood up and shouted at the door. At this moment, the Linli building was closed, so they were not afraid of being heard. As soon as Yin Xuedong finished speaking, the door opened with a squeak. Seeing Su Li's messy hair and wrinkled and blood-stained clothes, everyone was shocked immediately. Were you attacked? Fang Yuan frowned and asked in a low voice. He subconsciously protected Su Li behind him. His sharp eyes glanced around the room. Soon, his eyes fixed on the melted glass bottle on the table. At this moment, a trace of extremely horrible spiritual power leaked from Su Li. Fang Yuan seemed to fall into a cold abyss. His whole body was stiff and he couldn't move. Soon, the horrible feeling disappeared, but the horrible feeling was printed in his ears and mind. He slowly turned around and saw Su Li's helpless eyes. I have a breakthrough. I can't respond. Sorry to make you worry. Chu Qingning heard the words and immediately laughed. He said with great joy, I see. That's a good thing. Su Li, you broke through the inborn fifth hurdle a long time ago. Now you break the bottleneck and enter the late inborn hurdle. The strength of the Linli building has been greatly enhanced. Su Li smiled slightly. She didn't admit or deny it. Fang Yuan's eyes were full of complex feelings. He was the closest to Su Li just now. Only he knew that Su Li's cultivation was far more than the inborn sixth hurdle. Because of the hard practice these days, he had reached the inborn fifth hurdle. If Su Li was only in the inborn sixth hurdle, she couldn't give him such a horrible feeling. The inborn eighth hurdle, or, Fang Yuan subconsciously tightened his lips. He should protect Su Li, but from the beginning to the end, Su Li's cultivation was several levels higher than his. So, how could he say that? Sister Li is so powerful. Fang Ling happily held Su Li's arm and pulled Su Li away. She said, go to the bathhouse to take a bath and change clothes. I have prepared the same clothes for you. People in the Lord Rui's mansion can't find it. Speaking of the Lord Rui's mansion, Su Li couldn't help but have a headache. She didn't know how to explain when she went back after she disappeared for a day and a half. After taking a bath and changing clothes, Fang Ling picked up the comb to comb Su Li's hair. She didn't forget to admire, Sister Li's hair is so beautiful. Even if you don't comb it, it is still as soft. Hey, why does it feel longer? Fang Ling muttered. Su Li looked at the girl's upturned mouth in the bronze mirror and couldn't help but laugh. She said, if you want it, why don't you work hard to practice the mental method I gave you? Fang Ling immediately sighed and said, Sister, I also want to practice hard to break through the inborn hurdle. But my talent is not as good as my brother. I am still in the ninth hurdle of the body refining realm. I really can't understand the AO sword skills at all. If I want to break through the inborn hurdle, I'm afraid I don't know when I will. The AO sword skills is only one of the ways to break through the inborn hurdle. If you don't have the talent to comprehend swordsmanship, this way may be too difficult for you. The inborn hurdle is the first step to communicate with the power of heaven and earth. In this case, you might as well choose to comprehend the world and nature. Su Li broke through the inborn hurdle twice in 2 lives. She had rich experience. Her words immediately enlightened Fang Ling, I know, Sister Li. I won't stick to the AO sword skills in the future. Maybe I can break through the inborn hurdle with my own ability. Su Li nodded slightly with a gentle smile on her face. Among all the people in the Linli building, Fang Ling's mind was the purest. Su Li felt most comfortable staying with her. After dinner, Su Li was about to leave at night. But Xian Jingzhou suddenly rushed in a panic. Fortunately, no one was on the first floor, so his real identity was not exposed. Mr. Li, is Mr. Li here? Xian Jingzhou rushed to the top floor and shouted. Su Li, who had just changed into cyan clothes, opened the door and said in a deep voice, Boss Xian, why are you so anxious? The whereabouts of Mr. Li were erratic. Xian Jingzhou just came to try his luck. He didn't expect that Mr. Li was really in the Linli building. He was overjoyed and said hurriedly, my wife is ill. I hope Mr. Li can help me. Su Li wanted to tease him, but when she heard that Siyu had something to do, she immediately changed her mind and said, take me there. In the slightly dim back room of Zhouyue Winery, Su Li sat in front of the bed and diagnosed Su Yu. It was a taboo to diagnose someone close to her. However, Xian Jingzhou didn't know the real identity of Mr. Li. Su Li didn't want to delay, so she directly agreed. Behind Su Li, Xian Jingzhou was concerned and his mind was on his wife. Next to Xian Jingzhou, Fang Yuan, Yin Xuedong, Chu Qingning and Fang Mu all came. Jingzhou, Siyu was looked at by so many people for the first time. She blushed slightly and said, I just feel sick. Why did you invite Mr. Li? Nonsense. Honey, you are a senior of the inborn realm. You are immune to diseases for a long time. If you suddenly feel sick, there must be a serious problem. Is it wrong for me to invite Mr. Li? Xian Jingzhou said with saliva spurting. Fang Yuan and others immediately left without a trace. Su Yu's face was redder, showing a little girl's style. In this life, she married the right person. After a long while, Su Li released her hand with a strange look. She put Su Yu's wrist in the quilt and turned around. It seemed that she was organizing her words. Fang Yuan, who had been paying attention to Su Li, saw that there was some irrepressible joy in her eyes. Could it be, Mr. Li, how is my wife? Is it a serious disease? Xian Jingzhou quickly asked with a serious face, this is not a place to talk. Why don't we go out and talk? Fang Yuan smiled slightly. Chu Qingning was puzzled and muttered in his heart, Su Li's aunt is sick, but this silly boy can still laugh. It doesn't matter. It's not a serious disease. Su Li comforted him and finally stopped Xian Jingzhou. She said, I will make a prescription later. Proprietress, remember to pay attention to rest and don't hurt the fetus. Xian Jingzhou didn't respond and nodded, thank you, Mr. Li. I will get the medicine right away. Su Yu, who was lying on the bed, was shocked and couldn't help but ask, Mr. Li, do you mean I? Su Li smiled brightly and nodded slightly, congratulations, proprietress. The little guy in your belly has been 2 months old. My wife is pregnant. Xian Jingzhou said in a daze and was suddenly dumbfounded. Chu Qingning and others were also shocked and immediately congratulated Su Li. Congratulations, Boss Xian. It's not easy for a senior of the inborn realm to give birth to a child. Congratulations. It's time to think of a name for the little guy. Everyone was chattering, and there was no lack of envy in Yin Xuedong's eyes. She secretly pinched Chu Qingning, which made Chu Qingning tremble secretly and feel wronged. He had worked hard enough, but it was difficult for a senior of the inborn realm to have a child. Xian Jingzhou and Siyu had their first child at such an old age. However, Chu Qingning never dared to say this to Yin Xuedong. Xian Jingzhou was still standing stupidly, immersed in ecstasy. Until Su Yu's slightly shy call came into his ear, he suddenly came to himself. He knelt beside the bed, grabbed his wife's hand, and said excitedly, My wife, you are so great. No, I am so great, ha 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 ha. Seeing that Xian Jingzhou was excited like a child and completely lost his usual calmness, Su Yu was also very happy in her heart. She couldn't help but roll her eyes and said, Look at you. Hey, 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 Xian Jingzhou seemed to only know how to smirk. The news came so suddenly that he was not ready to be a father. Su Li looked at this scene and picked up the booklet with a faint smile on her lips. Only she and Su Yu were left in the Su family. It was a blessing to have the next generation. After writing the prescription, Su Li and others left one after another. They had no reason to continue to stay here. Zhouyue Winery was next to the Linli building. If there was any danger, they could also respond to it. Chapter 251. At this moment, Su Li, whom Siyu missed, had returned to the affiliated school of the National Academy overnight. This time, Su Li disappeared for 1.5 days for no reason. Wu Bin was so anxious that he almost reported it to Dongfang Rui. Fortunately, Yun Yi and others knew the details of Su Li. They were smart enough to find a reasonable reason to stop Wu Bin. After all, Wu Bin believed that the guards of Yunwei could not betray Su Li and the Lord Rui's mansion, so he was very relieved. As for the reason, the only way to delay the time was to break through her cultivation. Wu Bin remembered that the Mrs. Cultivation was the acquired 8th hurdle. If she broke through, wouldn't she reach the acquired 9th hurdle? That was the last stage of the acquired hurdle. Thinking of this, Wu Bin was not anxious. Instead, he hoped that Su Li could practice in isolation for a few more days. After all, a short time meant that she could break through sureby. As soon as Su Li returned to her boudoir, Mammy Li immediately came in and said, "Miss, you are finally back." Mammy Li told Su Li what Yun Yi told her. Su Li was slightly surprised and then nodded and chuckled. It was the right step to subdue the guards of Yun Wei, which saved her a lot of trouble. "Yun Yi, come in." Yun Yi, who was guarding outside the door, heard Su Li's voice and felt relieved. He opened the door and walked in. "I am Yun Yi, miss." He was the only guard of Yun Wei who knew all the details of Su Li. It was because he knew that it was impossible for the miss to be in danger in Yunjing City that he dared to lie about the military intelligence. Otherwise, he would be more anxious than anyone in the affiliated school of the National Academy. Seeing Yun Yi, Su Li narrowed her eyes and nodded, "Thank you. Thanks to your adaptability this time. Take this bottle of elixir." Yun Yi held his head high, but there was a hint of hesitation on his face. Ms. Li was famous, so the elixir she took out was absolutely not bad. He hesitated not because of doubt, but whether he should take it or not. He just did what he should do. Su Li couldn't help but laugh. She waved her hand and the bottle of elixir automatically flew into Yun Yi's arms, which made Yun Yi flustered for a while. He was afraid that the jade bottle would break. "Take it. You deserve it. There are 12 auxiliary elixirs for practice in it. They can speed up your practice. 9 of them are given to Yuner and the others. You keep the remaining 3. With the help, you can break through the inborn 5th hurdle in less than 3 months. From now on, you will come to me every 3 months to get the pills. Do you hear me?" Hearing this, Yun Yi's eyes widened and he was overjoyed. He hid the jade bottle close to his body and immediately knelt down and kowtowed. "Thank you, miss, for bestowing me with the divine medicine." Not to mention their cloud pavilion, even in the entire martial arts world, there were very few pills that could assist the cultivation of the Xiantian realm and above. Most of them could only assist the cultivation of the Xiantian realm from the 1st stage to the 3rd stage. In the martial arts world, the early stage of the Xiantian realm was called the Xiantian realm, and the 4th stage of the Xiantian realm was called the middle stage of the Xiantian realm. So, it was simply unheard of to have an auxiliary pill that could help the breakthrough to the middle stage of the Xiantian realm. Young Miss is really talented, to be able to research this level of medicinal pill. Soon, Yun Yi's joy disappeared and turned into a dignified look. A man's wealth was his own ruin. The news that Miss had this kind of pill must not be leaked out. It seems that you've already thought of this, so I won't remind you any further. Cultivate well and don't let me down. Su Li reminded him lightly, and Yun Yi immediately bent over and kowtowed several times. "Yes, young miss. Well, you don't need to be too nervous. The 10 guards of the Yunj sect have passed my test. It's not a big problem for the news to be leaked." Su Li waved her hand to let Yun Yi relax. She said, "Go out and call Butler Wu by the way. If I don't show him something, he won't be so easily fooled." "Yes, Mississippi." Yun Yi bowed and left. Soon, Wu Bin hurriedly stepped into the room. Seeing that Su Li was intact, he immediately breathed a sigh of relief. Then he slightly opened his eyes in astonishment. The acquired 9th hurdle. Her breath was unstable. Miss really broke through. Yun Yi didn't lie to him. He quickly reacted and quickly saluted, "Congratulations, Mississippi. You broke through the acquired 9th hurdle in just 1 day and night. Your talent is not inferior to that of the talents in the National Academy of Martial Arts." At the same time, he thought happily that he must tell the Lord as soon as possible. Although the identity of Princess Li was personally recognized by Lord Rui, it was inevitable that the juniors of the lords and the women in the palace gossiped with each other. A girl who was born in the vulgar countryside suddenly leaped over the branches and became a high and aloof Junju. The young ladies who were originally from noble families would naturally feel humiliated. In front of Prince Rui, they did not dare to speak carelessly, but in private, they might belittle the young lady. Occasionally, Wu Bin heard that a certain miss gathered together and said in private that the miss was the plaything of the lord and was very favored by the lord. So, she got the position of princess. Many people actually believed in such a preposterous statement and fought to spread it. It really angered him so much that he ascended to heaven and 2 Buddhas came into being. He couldn't eat for several days. He quickly sent more people to clear up the rumors. But the power of one person was limited. How could he stop the misses from all the noble families in Yunjing City? But now the miss broke through from the acquired 8th hurdle to the acquired 9th hurdle in less than half a year. It was completely different. The talent comparable to the martial arts genius of the National Academy was enough to prove Su Li's innocence. Even if she didn't rely on anyone, she would also shine. Butler, you flatter me. Su Li smiled indifferently and said, if you don't have anything to say, you can leave. I have to continue to consolidate my realm. Wu Bin nodded quickly and said, yes, yes. Miss, it's important for you to practice. I will leave first. Then, Wu Bin didn't dare to delay. He quickly left the room and closed the door considerately. Su Li looked at him and sighed slightly. She was gratified. The past should not be admonished. It was her father's blessing to have such a loyal servant. In the blink of an eye, more than a month had passed. In the past month, Ling Li almost came to the affiliated school every day. Playboys and young talents from all over Yunjing City still came to make trouble. Most of them came to listen to Su Li's anecdotes. Every day, the affiliated school of the National Academy was crowded. It was more lively than the National Academy. Every night, Ling Li sneaked into the affiliated school of the National Academy like a cat that stole fish. He took Su Li away secretly and visited all the beautiful scenery in Yunjing City. He even didn't let go of the scenic spots and historical sites around Yunjing City. After the mental remembrance sacrifice, Su Li untied the knot in her heart. Every time she went out with Ling Li, she smiled more and more. Ling Li was naturally more happy. He couldn't wait to ask Chiu Meng to propose marriage immediately, but Su Li stopped him. The situation in the Ling mansion is chaotic. If I come, there will be more variables. When you succeed in your plan, I will wait for you. In the evening wind, the girl calmly narrated as if she could see the situation in Yunjing. At the end of her words, her cheeks turned red, just like the rosy clouds reflected by the setting sun. She looked beautiful instantly. Plop. 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 Looking at the touching appearance of his sweetheart, Ling Li's heart beat uncontrollably. He only saw Su Li's perfect side face. Few women in the world could be like her. For an uncertain ending, in order not to affect his plan, she was determined to wait for him. Ling Li murmured. Hierarch, who had always been indifferent to women, had a flash of slyness in his eyes. Suddenly, he buried himself in Su Li's chest and touched a ball of softness. Ling Li. Su Li was so angry and ashamed. Her cheeks immediately turned red. She stretched out her hands to push him away, but Ling Li was determined to stay. He held Su Li's hands domineeringly. His cultivation was a little higher than Su Li's. Even if they competed in strength, Su Li was no match for him. Moreover, Su Li couldn't hurt Ling Li cruelly. After a while, Su Li helplessly looked at Ling Li lying on her lap and squinting his eyes with enjoyment. Finally, she gave up resistance. She was no match for this rascal. Great Hierarch Ling's shamelessness, I've finally witnessed it today. You truly live up to your reputation. Hearing Su Li's teasing, Ling Li slightly raised his mouth. He turned sideways and held Su Li's waist with his hands. Smelling the fragrance from the girl, his tone was almost overflowing with love. My shamelessness only applies to my wife. If my wife is still not satisfied, then there's nothing I can do. Su Li's face suddenly turned red again. She snorted and said, "Who is your wife?" "I haven't agreed yet." Ling Li immediately pretended to be shocked and said disappointedly, "Honey, you just said you would wait for me. Why do you regret so soon? It really makes your husband's heart ache." "Well, don't make trouble," Su Li gently knocked on Ling Li's forehead. Ling Li cried out in pain, but he calmed down. In fact, most of the time when he and Su Li were together, they were quiet. Only a few of them made trouble like children. But every time Ling Li made trouble, Ling Mo couldn't help but leave. He was afraid that if he saw too much, the great and glorious image of Master in his heart would completely collapse. Master is much happier than before when he is with Miss Su Li. He no longer sighs and has nightmares. Should I also try to find a... Ling Mo's indifferent expression hit a fiery heart. By the way, Ling Li. Is Ling Qinglan's real name Emo? Su Li suddenly asked. Ling Li was surprised. Finally, he nodded and said, "Yes. Ling Qinglan is an orphan of the Yi family. He is the eldest son. His real name is Emo. Later, he survived and was adopted by my second uncle's family. He changed his name to Ling Qinglan." "How do you know it?" Su Li smiled and said softly, "I just ask a question for someone else." Ling Li suddenly thought of the young man in cyan. He frowned slightly and hesitated for a long time. But he couldn't help but ask in a low voice, "What is the relationship between you and him?" As a man, how could Ling Li allow his beloved to have another man beside her? If it was an ordinary man, it would be fine. But Mr. Li's talent and means were enough to threaten him. Between him and I, we are at most estranged partners. What are you worried about? Su Li chuckled and her eyes were clear. The answer she said made Ling Li calm down. It was almost the same as the answer given by Mr. Li. The relationship between Ling Li and Su Li was almost fixed. Now it was impossible for Mr. Li to intervene. Thinking of this, Ling Li smiled. Su Li couldn't help but smile. Chapter 252. In the past month, in addition to Su Li and Chu Lu, there was another person who lived a very comfortable life. That person was the former Xiangzhu of the Hehuan sect, Chu Lu. Leaning against the escalator on the third floor, Chu Lu looked at the bustling drinkers and waiters downstairs. Compared with the time when she just came, she was more relaxed and relieved and less worried. The Linli building didn't go back on their words. They didn't ask her to do anything in the past month. Just yesterday, Chu Qingning sent the antidote of the Hongqian powder. After a night of torment, the poison accumulated in her body for many years was eliminated. The effect was immediate and scary. Even if Mr. Li is very knowledgeable, it is impossible for him to expel the poison of nearly 10 years so quickly. The antidote used must be extraordinary. Chu Lu sighed and guessed. In this world, human life was the most worthless. Although she wanted to say that she was precious, she also knew that the value of the antidote used by Mr. Li was probably more than her own value. Such an important favor, but Mr. Li didn't mention it. I was worried that he would regret before. I was really a villain who gauged the heart of a gentleman. Chu Lu smiled bitterly. At this moment, Fang Ling came upstairs with a plate and said with a smile, "Sister Chu, what are you doing?" "It's time to drink the medicine." Chu Lu saw her and quickly took the hot medicine bowl. She smiled and said, "Thank you, Miss Fang Ling." The medicine was fierce and detoxified all the poison. Chu Lu was inevitably hurt. The medicine that Fang Ling brought was for her to recover. "You are welcome." Fang Ling smiled and shook her head. After Chu Lu drank the medicine soup, she took the medicine bowl and was about to go downstairs. But Chu Lu's voice came from behind. "Miss Fang Ling, please wait. Is there anything else, Sister Chu?" Fang Ling looked back with doubt. Chu Lu hesitated. Finally, she walked quickly to Fang Ling and asked in a low voice, "Miss Fang Ling, do you know what the antidote that Mr. Li gave me yesterday is made of?" Fang Ling looked strange and answered naturally, "Sister Chu, you baffled me. There are so many kinds of elixirs that Mr. Li refined, and the prescriptions are even more complicated. How can I know how to refine the antidote you took?" Fang Ling's answer was within Chu Lu's expectation, but she was still disappointed. Fang Ling raised her eyebrows slightly. Thinking of her brother's instructions, a sly look flashed in her eyes. She deliberately lowered her voice and said, "Sister Chu, the prescription of the elixir is Sir's secret. It's wrong to inquire about it. However, I saw that when Mr. Li refined the antidote for my sister, my brother took something into it." Chu Lu's thoughts were immediately aroused. She couldn't help but ask, "What is it?" "Full moon and heartstrings." "What?" Fang Ling says it out loud. Chu Shi is so scared that she widens her eyes and almost has a cardiac arrest. "Mr. Li, the culprit of that bloody storm, let her eat it." "Oh, I didn't say complete. It's just a shell of the full moon and heartstrings." Fang Ling added with a smile, rolling her eyes, "I heard from my brother that Sir sacrificed a lot in order to peel off a layer of the outer shell to detoxify you." Hearing that, Chu Lu's heart was in turmoil. She was extremely complicated. She believed Fang Ling's words. Anyway, she stayed in the Hehuan sect for nearly a long time. If the full moon and heartstrings, such a miraculous thing, was destroyed, it would not be complete. Even if it was still effective, it would be limited. In order to fulfill his promise, Mr. Li gave up the way of the Zifu. Chu Lu's mind was overwhelmed by guilt almost instantly. She was stunned and didn't come to herself for a long time. Fang Ling saw that Chu Lu had such a big reaction and was slightly shocked. It seemed that she had said too much. "What are you doing?" A slightly helpless voice came. Fang Ling looked up and saw Su Li dressed in cyan clothes. She was not surprised. Since Su Yu was pregnant, Su Li ran to the Linli building more often. She was embarrassed and vomited. Then she turned and ran away. She said so much just because she felt guilty for Chu River's sake. Both she and her brother didn't have a good impression of Chu Shi. Although the relationship between Chu Lu and the Linli building was just a transaction, Chu Lu was too narrow-minded. Obviously, Sister Li had said it so clearly, but Chu Lu still doubted it. If she felt comfortable, it would be strange. Looking at Fang Ling going away, Su Li shook her head slightly. With Fang Ling's courage, she wouldn't say that. It was probably Fang Yuan's idea. "Chu Lu, come up and see me." Hearing Su Li's call, Chu Lu came to herself and went upstairs anxiously. She sat down beside the chair in front of the table. "You don't need to worry about what Fang Ling said. The full moon and heartstrings is not as serious as you think." Su Li's first sentence was to comfort her. But when she said that, Chu Lu's face was more guilty. Obviously, she misunderstood Su Li and said that to comfort her. Su Li was more helpless. She shook her head and took out a thin piece of paper from the drawer. It was full of small words. "Well, I have news about your brother. As for whether to recognize him or not, you decide." "Is there news about my brother?" Chu Lu trembled when she heard that. She couldn't care about anything else and took the paper carefully and eagerly. Ling Qinglan, 18 years old, was adopted by Ling Feng, the second son of the Ling family, after the extermination of the Yi family 14 years ago. He changed his name to Ling Qinglan. After that, he lived a carefree life for 10 years until Ling Feng died suddenly. Now he is the chief of the Supreme Judiciary and is in charge of the Supreme Judiciary. Since he took office, he has been investigating the clues of the outstanding cases on the pretext. Chu Lu didn't read much and her eyes were blurred. Tears dripped down her cheeks. When she saw that Ling Qinglan had been tracking down the murderer all these years, she couldn't help the sadness in her heart and burst into tears. Su Li looked indifferent and watched Chu Lu crying. She didn't stop her or say anything. She only heard the rhythmic tapping of her fingertips on the edge of the table. After an hour, the crying in the room gradually stopped. Chu Lu's eyes were swollen, but she couldn't hide the excitement in her eyes. She grasped the paper in her hand tightly and asked expectantly, "Mr. Li, can I go to see him now?" A smile appeared on Su Li's indifferent face. She nodded slightly and said meaningfully, "The murderer of the extermination of the Yi family is still at large. If you want to save Yi Mo's life, you'd better guard against others." Chu Lu's face changed immediately and she worried about the safety of her brother. She absent-mindedly said goodbye and left the attic. After 3 days, Chu Lu didn't go out. Fang Yuan, who knew the inside story, was surprised. On the 4th day, Chu Lu found Fang Yuan with a pale face and whispered, "Protector Fang, I want to see Mr. Li again." "I don't know." Fang Yuan was a little annoyed and said coldly, "Mr. Li has fulfilled his promise. It has nothing to do with you. You can't see him. If you can, please leave these days." Chu Lu was anxious immediately, but Fang Yuan shook his head and left directly. It was Su Li's order to let her leave. This woman's heart was in a mess. "Mr. Li will definitely help me." Chu Lu bit her lower lip and whispered. She clutched her chest with one hand and seemed to be out of breath. Living in the Linli building for more than a month, she was used to the discussion of Mr. Li, but she forgot that the careful care was all because of the deal. After a while, Su Li came back from the Zhouyue winery. She flew directly to the top floor and didn't appear in Chu Lu's eyes. Chu Lu, or Yi Shui. This woman was as smart as Ling Qinglan, but her experience made her have the heart of a weak person. She couldn't think independently like Ling Qinglan. In other words, Chu Lu had a sense of dependence on the Linli building and Su Li now. If she was not Yi Mo's sister, it would be a good thing. Su Li let Chu Lu live in the Linli building to feel peaceful. She wanted to absorb Chu Lu into the Linli building and use her. But since she knew that Chu Lu's brother was Ling Qinglan, she immediately dispelled this idea. After all, Ling Qinglan was a member of the Yi Ma cult. He was the only relative of Chu Lu. After they recognized each other, Chu Lu was likely to expose the Linli building to the Yi Ma cult, which was unacceptable. Therefore, Chu Lu needed to be beaten. Su Li narrowed her eyes slightly. She wanted Chu Lu not to mention anything about the Linli building even if she went back to Ling Qinglan. Although this process might not be very good for Chu Lu. But it had nothing to do with her. If it weren't for Ling Li, she might not let her recognize Ling Qinglan. The relationship between her and Chu Lu really didn't arouse her sympathy. Compared with the previous life, she was more humane in this life. There were many partners around her who worked hard with her. After 3 years, she just got rid of the most annoying Zhu Yan. She also untied the knot in her heart and got together with Ling Li again. But all these didn't mean that the influence of the previous life on her was reduced. In her bones, Su Li was still the cold-blooded devil that ordinary people couldn't accept. She would do anything to achieve her goals. It was still cold in February. In the east courtyard of the Ling mansion, Ling Li leaned on the wheelchair and basked in the sun. He was more worried than before. These days, he didn't pay special attention to Su Li's whereabouts, but he noticed that Su Li disappeared for a period of time every few days. During this time, she never mentioned where she went. Ling Li couldn't help but think of the young man in cyan who always smiled. No, Li won't lie to me. Ling Li got rid of the distractions, but he felt bitter in his heart. He knew that he was too nervous about Su Li, so he felt worried about gains and losses. But knowing was one thing, and feeling was another. "Master, you are not in a stable state of mind. Is there anything bothering you?" Ling Xian's gentle voice sounded in his ears. Ling Li came to his sense and turned his head to see a pair of gentle eyes. He immediately moved away uncomfortably and changed the topic. "Why didn't Xiaoma and Qinglan come today?" Ling Xian looked at Ling Li, who turned his back. Her eyes were no longer gentle, but full of gloom. But her tone was still gentle. Ling Mo heard that there were clues, so he immediately went out of the city to investigate the Wanjian sect. Master Qinglan went to the Supreme Judiciary in a hurry. In a hurry. Ling Li's eyes flickered slightly. Is Su Qingtan going to come out of practice? Chapter 253. It's still early for the affiliated school of the National Academy to open. Master, take a rest before you set off. Ling Xian said. Ling Li was thinking about Su Qingtan. He nodded slightly and pushed the wheelchair back to the study. He was so absorbed in thinking that he didn't find that Ling Xian's eyes were shining. Master, don't bother yourself too much. I lit the incense for you. I'll go down now. Ling Xian rubbed the flint and lit the incense. She looked at the white smoke slowly drifting out. She smiled coldly and turned to leave the room. In less than a quarter, Ling Li leaned on the chair and fainted. It was hard to guard against a thief at home. Ling Li would never expect that Ling Xian, who had been loyal to him, would suddenly attack him with the knockout drug provided by the Linli building, knockout incense. The smell of knockout incense was exactly the same as that of ordinary incense. If one was not a master of poison, he couldn't distinguish it even if his cultivation was high. Squeak, the door was opened. Ling Xian came back. She put out the burning incense to ventilate and covered the blanket for Ling Li unhurriedly. She whispered, Master, have a good sleep. After you wake up, you won't have any worries. I will eradicate all obstacles for you. Then Ling Xian smiled and pointed at the place between Ling Li's eyebrows to smooth the wrinkles. Then she straightened her back and stopped smiling. She turned to leave the Ling house. Ling Li closed his eyes tightly. He felt something was wrong when he was in a coma. Unfortunately, the efficacy of knockout incense was so strong that he couldn't resist it. At the same time, Su Li received a secret letter from the killer of the Shuolo cult. She opened the secret letter and took out the paper. It was a map of Yunjing City. A red circle was circled not far from the Moyin Street. It's the same trick as last time. What does he want to show me? Su Li frowned and curled her lips slightly. After thinking for a while, she didn't want to delve into it. She got up and said to Mammy Li, I'll go out and come back before the school opens. Let Yuni keep an eye on me. Yes, Mississippi, Mammy Li responded, but she couldn't help but mutter in her heart, it's not enough to go out at night. Why do you want to have a rendezvous with the third master so early in the morning? The street in the early morning was very cold, and the affiliated school of the National Academy was even quieter. Su Yu, who had restored her true face, hid in the corner of the street. She looked at the heavily guarded affiliated school of the National Academy. She was hesitant, but she couldn't hide her excitement. She had decided to recognize Su Li. She really wanted Su Li to know that she had a nephew. But his identity was sensitive. How was he supposed to meet her? Su Yu pursed her lips and clasped her hands nervously in front of her chest. She came here almost every morning secretly. She didn't leave until the affiliated school of the National Academy was crowded. Forget it. I'd better ask Mr. Li for help. Su Yu muttered to herself and turned to leave. Mr. Li was neither a relative nor a friend of theirs, and he had helped them a lot. It was embarrassing for them. However, she finally understood that if she wanted to meet Su Li without exposing her whereabouts, she could only rely on Mr. Li's help. But at this moment, Su Yu caught a glimpse of a red shadow flashing from the back door of the National Academy and disappeared into the alley. That's Su Li. Although it was just a back, Su Yu, who missed Su Li every day, recognized her at a glance. She was surprised. That speed is clearly above the inborn realm. Where is Su Li going? Su Yu didn't have time to think and immediately followed up. Although she was pregnant and her strength was affected, her body movement was not affected. She could still display the speed of the inborn ninth hurdle. Su Li was thinking about Ling Li, so she was very fast. She arrived at the place marked on the map in less than 15 minutes. It's just one corner. This place is so remote. What did Ling Li arrange? Su Li felt strange and finally realized that something was wrong. Even in the early morning, the surrounding streets were too quiet. No. Although the letter was sent by the Shualo cult, there was nothing in the letter to prove that it was Ling Li's idea. Anyone could draw a circle on the map. It was not Ling Li. She was fooled. Su Li realized it. The sense of crisis that had been suppressed was immediately magnified. Her eyelids kept twitching. Then she retreated without saying anything. But at this moment, an extremely horrible power shrouded her like a mountain. Go to hell. Su Li groaned with blood spilling from the corner of her mouth. Her bones were creaking because of the pressure. She would be crushed into minced meat in the next moment. At the moment of crisis, Su Li was very clear-headed. She bit the tip of her tongue. The severe pain stimulated her whole body. She immediately recovered her actions and got rid of the suppression. Boom! The bluestone tiles where Su Li was were all crushed into powder. The stone chips were flying. There was a slight sound of surprise. It seemed that the person was surprised that Su Li could escape a fatal blow. Su Li didn't go to see the source of the sound. She turned around and fled. The person who attacked was definitely a senior in the longevity realm. She had no power to resist at all. She could only escape. I was careless. Who on earth wants to kill me? They even sent such a horrible person. Su Li looked gloomy. Recently, she was with Ling Li, so her vigilance was too low. If it was in the past, she would not find such a trap until it was close. The person who sent the Shualo cult must be related to the Inma cult. Is it the third elder? Su Li thought quickly. She didn't slow down and escaped to the downtown area in the blink of an eye. Even if the person who chased after her was powerful, he would not dare to attack her in public. Otherwise, the Dongfang family would investigate thoroughly for the sake of their reputation. He. Little mouse, you run so fast. A cold voice suddenly sounded. Su Li's face changed dramatically because the voice didn't come from behind, but from the front. She was about to turn around immediately, but the person who attacked her moved faster. A palm print as big as a cattail leaf fan attacked her fiercely. In a hurry, Su Li only had time to adjust her body to avoid the fatal point. Boom! Su Li flew out like a rag. She smashed several brick walls and fell into a dilapidated courtyard. Then she stopped. In dizziness, Su Li shook her head fiercely. She was about to get up. But at this moment, a person came out from behind and kicked her in the back. Puff! Su Li's internal organs were shaken. She couldn't help but cough up blood. The blood was sprinkled on the weeds. The color was extremely bright. Her pupils shrank. She wiped the blood from the corner of her mouth. Just one blow damaged her internal organs. She was seriously injured and almost died. Was this the longevity realm? You can still keep so calm in the face of death. You do have some skills. No wonder the young master will be fascinated by you and fall in love with you. An elegant voice came from behind. Su Li's eyes flashed a ray of light. She slowly sat up and turned her eyes. Her voice was still calm. Ling Xian, I should have known it was you. I thought your loyalty was greater than jealousy. Now it seems. I overestimated you. Ling Xian's eyes were cold. Everything I did was for the young master. Don't talk nonsense. At this time, there were footsteps behind her. A strange elder came into Su Li's eyes. Holy girl, I need an explanation. The elder stared at Ling Xian with a cold face. Your Excellency, did you secretly summon me for your selfishness? Ling Xian stared at Su Li and wanted to strangle her immediately. But Su Li was lucky and gave her a chance to speak. If she couldn't get the elder's trust, she would be in a very bad situation. Thinking of this, she saluted respectfully, Elder, how dare I deceive you? This woman is scheming and extremely cunning. Even the hierarch was fascinated by her and lost the full moon and heartstrings. I made this plan just to wake the young master up. Even if the young master hates me in the future, I will never complain. The elder's expression was slightly relaxed. It was not that he didn't believe Ling Xian, but Ling Xian concealed something from him, so he was dissatisfied. Your Excellency, I certainly know your loyalty to the hierarch. Ling Xian was calm. But at this time, Su Li suddenly said, May I ask what is your position in the Ima cult? How is it compared with the third elder? If you can invite the third elder, I have a way to prove that she is not the evil woman that Ling Xian said. If what Ling Xian said is false, you will regret for a lifetime if you make a wrong move. The elder frowned. What Su Li said was reasonable. The third elder was in the headquarters of the Ima cult. It was very convenient to invite him. The hierarch was young and easily deceived, but the third elder would not be deceived in a short time, right? When Ling Xian heard Su Li's words, she was very anxious, but she didn't dare to show it on the surface. An idea flashed in her mind, and she immediately pretended to be extremely anxious. Elder, do it quickly. She is stalling for time. This woman's destiny is too strong. She is not dead after being hit by you 2 times in a row. If the time is too long, the force behind this woman may be on the way. Su Li's eyes flashed, and she was about to call out the mask. But she thought that Ling Li didn't wear his secret method in this life. If the mask was found out from his body, wouldn't it directly prove that she stole the secret method of the Ima cult? Elder, it's too late. You have seen me grow up. How can you trust outsiders? Kill her quickly, and let's go. Ling Xian's eyes were full of tears, and she cried. The fourth elder's heart suddenly softened. Without saying anything, he patted the head of Su Li who couldn't move. Su Li smiled bitterly and closed her eyes. Ling Xian grinned, and her eyes were red. She showed a successful smile. She wanted to see Su Li being patted into pieces. Bang! A miserable groan sounded in Su Li's ears. She opened her eyes blankly, and saw that the old man was also stunned. His hands were full of blood, and he stared at her back. Who helped me to block the blow? Su Li's face was pale. She covered her chest and tried to look back. She couldn't see the face of the dying person lying in the pool of blood. But when she saw the blood flowing from the lower body, she suddenly felt a sharp pain from the bottom of her heart, which became more and more intense. No, how could she be here? Su Li's eyes were full of panic, and her lips were trembling. She completely forgot the crisis behind her, and she didn't know where she got the strength to climb to the pool of blood. When she was close, a familiar face came into her eyes. Su Li stiffly and gently held her upper body in her arms. She lowered her head, and tears finally came out. Chapter 254. Clatter, the sky was gloomy, and it suddenly rained, drowning Su Li's cry. When Su Yu heard the word "aunt," her consciousness that was about to go away seemed to be pulled back by her obsession. She opened her eyes reluctantly and saw the tears on Su Li's face. They mixed with rainwater and dripped down her chin. She suddenly grasped Su Li's hand and moved her lips. Li, how do you know? Su Li trembled all over. She suddenly raised her head and saw Su Yu's half-opened eyes. Hope rose in her heart. She condensed a stream of green starlight and poured it into Su Yu's body. But she forgot that she was also seriously injured. Blood immediately rushed up her throat. She reluctantly swallowed a mouthful of heart blood. With a strange flush on her face, she hurriedly said, "Aunt, I know. I have always known it. I am timid. I didn't dare to recognize you at the first time. You must be safe. I will take you away now." When the green starlight entered her body, Su Yu breathed heavily. When she had a little strength in her body, she immediately stopped Su Li from transmitting the green starlight. She stared at Su Li with gentle eyes, as if she wanted to remember this face forever. Ahem. Silly girl, run away. No. Aunt, you will be fine. While talking, Ling Xian and the elder approached. The rain fell around them, but was bounced off by an invisible force. It was still clean. However, Su Li was covered with mud at this moment. Su Li clenched her teeth and held Su Yu. Her broken body couldn't bear the heavy punishment. She groaned, and blood flowed from the corner of her mouth. But it was quickly washed away by the cold rain. She seemed to see nothing and just wanted to hold Su Yu and leave. But Ling Xian wouldn't let Su Li get what she wanted. She looked at Su Li playfully. Su Li picked up Su Yu from the mud and stood up straight. Then she kicked Su Li and Su Yu away immediately. Their blood splashed in the sky. They hit the wall and fell bricks and stones. If there was no accident, both of them should be dead. The elder frowned and reminded her, "Holy girl, this trip is against the harmony of nature. Just kill them. There is no need to torture them." Ling Xian lowered her head and obediently admitted her mistake. "I was rude." The old man looked relaxed and nodded slightly, but he did not see the joy in Ling Xian's eyes. If Su Li didn't die in pain, how could she vent the hatred she had accumulated in the past few months? "It's getting late. After I take the demoness head, I'll return to see the sect master." The old man walked toward the broken wall and said, "According to what you said, as long as this woman dies, the demonic spell will naturally be undone. After the cult master wakes up, he will surely understand the Holy Virgin's painstaking efforts." Ling Xian's eyes lit up. She nodded and smiled. "You are right." Boom. The elder flicked his sleeves and raised a gust of wind, which lifted all the scattered bricks and stones. The situation made the elder slightly moved. When the two people were kicked away by Ling Xian, it was Su Li who was holding Su Yu, but now it was reversed. Su Yu had lost her breath, but she still stood in front of Su Li and used her last strength to keep Su Li alive. Such a sentimental person, was it really as the holy maiden said, a demoness? He was suspicious, and his palm fell on the head of Su Li, who was in a coma, for a long time. Ling Xian walked closer and saw this scene. Her face immediately became gloomy. Su Li was still alive. "Elder, now is not the time to be soft-hearted. Since you don't want to do it, let me do it myself." Ling Xian stepped forward and slammed her palm without hesitation. The old man's pupils contracted. At this moment, he finally felt that he was cheated. But at this moment, the third elder's anxious voice came from afar, "Fourth elder, stop Ling Xian." "What?" The old man stood in front of Su Li and immediately stopped Ling Xian. Bang! Ling Xian was shocked by the counterforce, and her pretty face turned pale. She stepped back several steps and looked extremely gloomy. "Fourth elder, you are so indecisive. You will only ruin the great plan of the hierarch." The old man snorted, "I now suspect that the Holy Virgin has evil intentions. Please don't act rashly. Wait for the third elder to come and decide." Ling Xian looked gloomy. She stared at Su Li's pale face. Suddenly, she thought of something and smiled calmly again. Such an injury had hurt her foundation. Even if Su Li escaped tonight, she would only become a useless person and couldn't live for more than 10 days. There was no need for her to be anxious. In the blink of an eye, the figure of the third elder was close. He was so anxious that he even forgot to separate the rain. The fourth elder was shocked, and his attention was subconsciously attracted by the third elder. This distraction suddenly made a flaw appear behind him. Suddenly, a flash of sword light appeared and stabbed the back of the fourth elder with great momentum. "Watch out, fourth elder." Such an unexpected change made it too late for the third elder to rescue him. He could only shout. Puff! In the eyes of Ling Xian, a huge wound of more than 10 feet appeared on the back of the fourth elder. He flew out directly and fell to the ground. A man in black with a bamboo hat appeared in front of Su Li out of thin air. Junior sister apprentice. Su Yu's body was already cold. The eyes of the man in black were full of grief and indignation, but he still had a little sense. He put the healing elixir into the mouth of Su Li, who was still alive, and then stood up. His eyes were full of killing intent. He was Wen Tingshan, who just arrived in Yunjing City today and heard the noise. You all deserve to die. Third elder, help me. Ling Xian screamed. The third elder hurriedly settled the fourth elder. He was full of anger but had no time to vent. He had to fight with Wen Tingshan. For a time, the rain was flying, and the shock waves smashed everything around into powder. Su Li and Ling Xian were blown out and fell directly on the bluestone street. The rain was pouring, and there was no pedestrian on the street. Ling Xian glanced at the two people who were fighting in the distance, and then saw Su Li, who was still in a coma. The fear in her eyes was immediately replaced by madness. Without any nonsense, she directly slapped Su Li's glabella. Stop! Stop! Wen Tingshan and the third elder saw this scene at the same time, and their expressions changed greatly. They shouted loudly, but Ling Xian turned a deaf ear to them. She didn't stop at all, and the smile on her face widened crazily. Su Li. At the moment when the palm was about to hit Su Li's face, Su Li suddenly opened her eyes. Her eyes were full of coldness and brutality. Ling Xian's scalp was numb, and immediately slapped her palm faster. Crack! The slender palm covered with mud pinched Ling Xian's wrist. The wound on it had turned white, and no blood flowed out. You still have strength? Ling Xian was stunned. She struggled hard, but felt that the strength was increasing rapidly. Then she heard a crisp sound. Crack! Ah! Su Li loosened her hand and stood up slowly. Ling Xian held her arm and retreated in horror. She shouted in panic, Third elder, help! The third elder frowned slightly and was about to step forward to stop her. But there was a long whistle behind him. Sword lights attacked him desperately, and he couldn't get away. Seeing this scene, Ling Xian was completely panicked. She stepped back for a few steps. She suddenly thought of something and said fiercely, Su Li, you can't kill me. If I die, the master will definitely not let you go. Su Li was expressionless and slightly stopped. Ling Xian was slightly happy and said, Su Li, if you still have some sense, let me go. I will explain it clearly in front of the master and accept my punishment. Anyway, as long as she successfully went back alive and exhausted Su Li to death, her plan would be successful. She would definitely be punished, but it didn't matter. As long as it was a long time, it was enough to erase everything. The master would finally choose her. It could only be her. It's ridiculous. Are you still dreaming at this time? Su Li's voice was hoarse like a ghost. She turned into a shadow and pinched Ling Xian's neck. Ling Xian was so scared that her face turned pale. Li, stop! Ling Li appeared at the corner of the street. He was wet all over, and his cold face was full of anxiety. The first scene he saw was that Su Li killed Ling Xian. He subconsciously stopped her. The voice was so familiar that it was almost engraved in his soul. Su Li's body trembled violently. Her pale face flashed a look of mockery. She pinched Ling Xian's throat with one hand. Crack! The crisp sound came to everyone's ears. The light in Ling Xian's eyes gradually disappeared, and she fell at Su Li's feet. God didn't let her go after all. Xian! Ling Li was still in red. He flashed like a gust of wind from behind Su Li and held Ling Xian, who fell to the ground. He forcibly passed some genuine energy to Ling Xian and saved her last breath. Haha! Ling Xian struggled to open her eyes. When she saw Ling Li's eyes full of anger and sadness, she immediately showed a sweet smile. It turns out that, the master, still, cares about, me. Xian. I'm so happy. Ahem. Blood constantly gushed from her throat and soaked Ling Li's chest. Ling Li immediately wanted to pass more genuine energy to Ling Xian, but was stopped by Ling Xian. She trembled and wanted to wipe the tears from Ling Li's eyes. It's useless. Xian, can't, accompany the master, Xian, crack. Ling Xian's arm hung down. The third elder and Wen Tingshan had stopped fighting. The third elder looked complicated, while the third elder was expressionless. There was some comfort in his eyes. Ling Li slowly raised his head and stared at Su Li's pale face. His eyes were painful and sad. He said slowly, Why? Why did you kill Xian? No matter what she did wrong, she didn't deserve to die. You clearly knew. He had been with Ling Xian for 10 years. He had always regarded Ling Xian as his sister. But now the woman he loved most killed his sister. Drip, drip, the rain gradually subsided. A drop of water fell on the ground along Su Li's clothes. It was quiet and harsh. Ling Li stared at Su Li's eyes interrogatively. But today, he could no longer see a trace of warmth in her eyes. There was only coldness, tyranny, and disappointment. Ling Li was shocked. He had no time to understand what happened. Su Li's expressionless face bloomed with a smile. The smile was obviously brilliant. But in Ling Li's eyes, it was like a withered flower, leaving only sadness. Chapter 255. The fate was over. Ling Li suddenly raised his head and looked at the beautiful figure in red. He was stiff, as if he was struck by lightning. He couldn't believe it. Why did everything change in just one morning? What did Ling Xian do? Ling Li groaned in pain, but he was interrupted as soon as he spoke. Uncle Shan, let's go. Su Li whispered. Wen Tingshan's eyes flashed with sadness. He turned around and walked to the collapsed wall. He gently held Su Yu, who was already cold. Madam, wait a minute. This is all a misunderstanding. Ling Xian did it willfully. Neither I nor the fourth elder knew about it. You. Seeing that Su Li was about to leave, the third elder swallowed the second half of his words. Su Li looked back for a moment, and her cold eyes fell on him like a ghost. The third elder had goosebumps all over his body. He was so scared that he could no longer continue to speak. He was in the longevity realm, and Madam was just at the peak of the inborn realm. Why, corpse? Why is there a corpse? When Ling Li saw the middle-aged woman in Wen Tingshan's arms, he finally realized something. His face was extremely pale. This person must be close to Su Li. Ling Xian killed her. No wonder Su Li was furious. The third elder looked at Ling Li's back and sighed sadly. He said, Hierarch, I'm afraid that the truth is more serious than you think. It was too late when I arrived. Only the fourth elder knows the details. Ling Li's body shook slightly, but he didn't look back. He slowly bent down and picked up Ling Xian. After a moment of silence, his hoarse voice came out. Go back to the headquarters. Ling Li and the other three returned to the headquarters of the Spectre's shadow. One was dead and the other was injured. It naturally caused a great shock. All kinds of speculations came one after another. At this moment, in the backyard, the fourth elder came to the courtyard with a pale face with the help of the third elder. He saw Ling Li standing next to the coffin at a glance. The third elder sighed and shook his head slightly. He supported the fourth elder to walk over. The fourth elder already knew everything at this moment. He regretted it very much. When he saw Ling Li, he immediately burst into tears. He knelt down and cried, Hierarch, please punish me to death. I listened to Ling Xian's slander and made a big mistake. Ling Li turned around. He was expressionless and pale. What happened? Say it. When I was doing closed-door training in the Mountain of Elders, I suddenly received a secret letter from Ling Xian, saying that you were bewitched by the demoness, the fourth elder said. Ling Li's face became paler and paler. In the end, he was shaky and couldn't stand stably. Sect leader, your health is important. The third elder felt extremely distressed when he saw this. The hierarch's innate talent was unparalleled, and he was already half a step into the longevity realm. But now, because of a few words, he couldn't stand still. One could imagine how great the blow was. Phew, taking a deep breath, Ling Li suddenly turned around and smashed the coffin into pieces in the horrified eyes of the two elders. Ling Xian, you are very good. Even if you die, you will let Li leave me completely. Ling Xian's eyes were red. Looking at Ling Xian's exposed face, she gnashed her teeth. What the fourth elder said was very detailed. When he heard that Ling Xian abused and killed Su Li, he couldn't wait to pull Ling Xian out of the coffin and kill her again. No matter how deep the affection was, when he wanted to kill Su Li with his own hands, it had already disappeared. Hierarch, the identity of the middle-aged woman is not simple. The fourth elder felt bitter, but he had to say something. I heard that Madame called her aunt, and the woman's lower body was bleeding seriously. It is very likely that she is pregnant. What? The third elder widened his eyes and said in horror, why didn't you say it earlier? He thought that his discovery was serious enough, but he didn't expect that the fourth elder hid such a big secret. Ha ha ha. The fate is over. It turns out that the fate is over, that Li said. Ha 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 ha. Ling Li's face was pale, and he laughed wildly. No matter how much he hated Ling Xian was dead. She was a member of the Yinma cult, and he was the hierarch of the Yinma cult. She killed her relatives. How could Su Li marry the hierarch of the Yinma cult? Puff! Ling Li was so sad that he spat out a few mouthfuls of blood and fell unconscious. Hierarch! The third elder exclaimed, and the whole backyard was immediately in chaos. After a while, the third elder looked at Ling Li, who was lying on the bed with a pale face. He had a complicated expression and struggled for a while. Finally, he didn't dare to say what he saw. Madam of the hierarch might not live for 10 days. In the blink of an eye, 3 days passed. For Su Li, there was only endless darkness in these 3 days. She turned the street with one breath and fainted directly. In the morning, the slightly dazzling sunshine shone on her face. Su Li's eyelashes trembled, and she finally woke up. Wake up! Wake up! Finally, you wake up. Ling, go and call everyone. A familiar voice came to her ears, and her eyes were also blurred. Su Li frowned and adapted to it for a moment. Finally, she saw the figure beside the bed. Ruhan? Su Li was confused. It was Mei Ruhan sitting beside the bed. Wasn't she in Qinghe province? Why did she come to Yunjing City? It's me, Li. When Mei Ruhan heard Su Li's hoarse voice, she couldn't help crying. At this moment, Su Li was not as brilliant as she used to be. Her face was terribly pale, just like a dead person, which made Mei Ruhan tremble. It's good that you are here. Su Li smiled and didn't ask the reason, because it was meaningless. She was proficient in the medical circle. How could she know that her foundation was destroyed and she didn't have many days to live? Thud! Thud! Soon, there was a messy sound of footsteps behind her. Su Li turned her head reluctantly. It was Xian Jingzhou who walked in the front. But at this moment, Xian Jingzhou's temples were gray, his eyes were red, and there were many wrinkles on both sides of his eyes, which made him look much older, like an old man in his twilight years. Uncle, Su Li's eyes were sad and blurred. She murmured and her pale lips immediately overflowed with blood. Now she was like a fragile porcelain full of cracks. Any fluctuation of her heart meridian might directly kill her. Li. Xian Jingzhou was shocked. He strode to the edge of the bed and said, "People in Jianghu will get their shoes wet. Don't worry about your aunt. The most important thing for you now is to recover." No matter how sorrowful he was, the man chose to comfort Su Li, Su Li looked at Xian Jingzhou in a daze and suddenly smiled. I know, uncle. You must be tired these days. Go and have a rest first. I'm not tired. An ugly smile appeared on Xian Jingzhou's old face. I have to take care of your aunt's funeral affairs. I don't have time to rest. As for you, it's better to put aside the matter of the Linli building and recover first. Xian Jingzhou left soon. Su Li could see that he was holding on. She didn't know whether he could hold on after her death. There were 6 people left in the room. Seeing Mei Ruhan and Fang Ling, whose eyes were red and swollen, Su Li couldn't help but chuckle. Ruhan, Ling, you two go out first. I have something to tell you. Don't be tired. Mei Ruhan stood up and reminded them. Then she went out of the attic with Fang Ling. At this moment, a cold female voice suddenly sounded in her mind. Tired? Mei Ruhan, your good friend can live for 6 days at most. It doesn't matter whether she is tired or not. What did you say? Mei Ruhan trembled all over. Fang Ling looked at her confusedly. What happened to Sister Ruhan? At the same time, the atmosphere in the room was solemn. Su Li sat up reluctantly and leaned against the pillow. After a moment of silence, she whispered, You should know that I don't have much time. As soon as the words came out, the 4 people in the room held their breath at the same time. Creak. Fang Yuan clenched his fists and stepped forward. The anxiety in his eyes almost broke through the limit. What panacea do you need? I'll go now. I'll go too. Chu Qingning's eyes were red. Su Li, I want to go back to Nanjiang with you. Don't die. Miss Su Li saved my life. If you need anything at this moment, I, Fang Mu, will do anything. I owe you a life. If you die, who can I find to pay the debt? Luo Yichen stared at Su Li and hoped that she could say something to save his life. But Su Li smiled and shook her head in everyone's expectant eyes. How could it be? Fang Yuan looked at the porcelain-like cheeks in front of him. The regret and despair in his heart broke out like a landslide and a tsunami. It's all Ling Li's fault. I'll kill him. Fang Yuan turned around and left. Chu Qingning and others wanted to stop him, but they were thrown away by him. His strength was so great that it was amazing. Even Luo Yichen was surprised. He hadn't seen Fang Yuan for a year. Fang Yuan's strength had made such great progress that he was not inferior to Luo Yichen. Su Li's expression became cold and she said faintly, If you want me to die with everlasting regret, go ahead. Fang Yuan's body shook violently. It seemed that his feet were splashed with glue. He could no longer move. He turned back and was full of resentment and complexity. He growled, Why? Why do you still protect him at this time? Didn't he hurt you enough? Looking at Fang Yuan's questioning eyes, Su Li closed her eyes and hid the disappointment in her eyes. She said softly, I have killed the culprit. There is no need to entangle with the Yinma cult. I don't have much time. You should listen to the next arrangement. As long as it develops according to what I said, the Linli building will become a big cult and realize your wishes. Fang Yuan's eyes twitched. He was angry and anxious. He said bitterly, Are you still thinking about that at this time? Otherwise? Even if I die, I must fulfill the agreement. Su Li smiled. That smile seemed to be beyond the mortal world. It was a beautiful withering. Chu Qingning and others were moved and shocked. Fang Yuan's reaction was more violent. He made up his mind and held Su Li in his arms. Chu Qingning was stunned at first. Then he smiled bitterly for his friend. Wasn't it too late for this fool to express his love now? Luo Yichen couldn't bear it and turned his head. After he was moved, he couldn't bear to see such a scene. Chapter 256. Fang Yuan held Su Li for a while and felt the slight resistance in his arms. He took a deep breath and gently let go of Su Li for fear of aggravating her injury. I'll be back soon. Fang Yuan took a deep look at Su Li and then strode away. Although his heart was full of despair, he had to try his best. Let's go. The other 3 people also left, leaving Su Li to recuperate alone. Only in the state of not consuming strength could Su Li's life be extended to the greatest extent. Su Li looked at the backs of the people who left. Various emotions flashed through her eyes, including hatred, regret, and sadness. Finally, it became extremely complicated. She closed her eyes. The helpless sigh quietly echoed in the room. In the evening, Yunyi came and soon left with a face of self-blame and heaviness. But it was impossible to make up for it. The only thing he could do was to try his best to complete the last order of the miss. At dinner, Fang Ling, Mei Ruhan and Yin Xuedong sat at the same table. The dishes on the table were full of color and smell, but no one touched the chopsticks. They were all in a daze. They had no appetite. Thinking of Su Li, the 3 people looked gloomy and didn't have the mood to eat. Mei Ruhan looked at the white rice in the bowl, and there was a hint of struggle in her eyes. About half a year ago, when she was checking the account, her wrist was accidentally pricked. From that day on, there often appeared a trace of unimaginable scenes in her dreams. But the familiarity from the soul made her involuntarily believe that the things in her dreams were true. If it was just a dream and didn't affect her daily life, it would be fine. But after this situation lasted for 3 months, something inexplicable happened to her. Another voice appeared in her mind out of nowhere. Who are you? Giggle. I am you, and you are me. There is no difference between you and me. The seductive and absolutely cold and arrogant tone was actually another her. She couldn't understand. The other her didn't seem to care about her feelings. She only told her that she must go to Yunjing City as soon as possible to be with Su Li, otherwise, she would occupy this body and kill Luo Yichen personally. Mei Ruhan didn't believe it at first. But the next day, her consciousness was completely suppressed. She helplessly watched Su Li seduce Luo Yichen and do that shameful thing with him. Although at the last moment of breakthrough, Su Li gave control of the body to her, she still felt humiliated. At the same time, she was also afraid. She understood Luo Yichen's feelings for her, so he would not guard against her at all. If this person really occupied her body again to kill Luo Yichen, she could not stop him at all. Don't worry. I just want you to be with Su Li. I won't hurt her. Every time I occupy your body, I will also suffer a great backlash, and I might even completely dissipate. How can I let myself fall into danger? Mei Ruhan couldn't tell whether it was true or not. But for Luo Yichen, she cleverly used Wen Tingshan to come to Yunjing City with him. On the way, the voice in her mind also hid and stopped communicating with her. As time passed, she let go of the fear in her heart and turned it into anticipation. After a while, Li left Ling's hand. But she didn't expect that Wen Tingshan's expression changed greatly as soon as he entered Yunjing City. He rushed away and soon brought back Su Li, who was dying. Mei Ruhan was really scared. She almost stayed by Su Li's bed for 3 days. When Su Li woke up, she naively thought that Su Li was fine. Unexpectedly, the voice in her mind told her that Su Li was going to die. Of course, she didn't believe it. She eavesdropped outside the room. Soon, the senior management of the Linli building knew that Su Li was going to die. For Mei Ruhan, it was like a bolt from the blue. From the first time they met in the Muyang girls' school, she felt that Su Li was very congenial. After a few months, she knew how amazing Su Li's talent was. She just stayed with Su Li for a short time, but her understanding of literature soared. Later, Su Li took her to the Qinghe girls' school, which had a promising future. Then she established the Linli building. She knew that the world was so colorful. For her, Su Li was not only a good friend but also a teacher. She also wanted to see Su Li reach the Lingtian realm step by step and become a giant who controlled the martial arts circle. But the bad news came before she reached the halfway point. How could she accept it? Lee is only 17 years old. How can she die? Mei Ruhan was full of unwillingness. If you don't want her to die, I have a way. The seductive voice came slowly in her mind. Mei Ruhan was shocked and couldn't help but ask, really? The seductive consciousness snorted and mocked, why should I lie to you? It's just that this method is not perfect. Your good friend may not accept it. Mei Ruhan frowned slightly, but the seductive consciousness was not anxious and let her hesitate. At this time, Mei Ruhan didn't find that her characteristics in some aspects were far beyond that of an 18-year-old girl. She also encountered a lot of events in Jianghu in the Linli building, but after all, she didn't participate in it personally. It could be said that Mei Ruhan had no experience in Jianghu at all. But facing a strange consciousness in her mind, she naturally chose to be vigilant. She even calmly confronted it and thought about the stakes. It was like an innate ability. In the blink of an eye, the dishes on the table were cold. Yin Xuedong cleaned up the bowls and chopsticks, and Fang Ling turned to boil medicine for Su Li. They were all tonics, but better than nothing. Mei Ruhan slightly raised her eyebrows and looked at the back of Yin Xuedong and Fang Ling. Her eyes gradually became firm. You tell Su Li in person, and let her judge whether your method is credible or not. Mei Ruhan's decision was extremely witty. Her knowledge and cultivation were too much lower than Su Li's. If she listened to the words of the seductive consciousness, she might not know whether it was true or not. In this case, it was better to let Su Li see it in person. Mei Ruhan's consciousness came out, and the seductive voice sounded again in her mind, but this time it was a little angry. Impossible. You know that I will have a backlash if I occupy your body. She doesn't deserve me to show up in person. You don't deserve me. Or you don't dare. Mei Ruhan gritted her teeth and responded, you threatened me to come to Su Li, obviously, you have a relationship with Su Li, don't treat me as a fool. You. The seductive consciousness made a sound of anger, and then calmed down. She regained her composure and said with a smile, good girl, you see it. In this case, I won't hide it. Su Li does have a relationship with me. In this case, I will risk the backlash, to help her. Then let's go now. Mei Ruhan breathed a sigh of relief and immediately went upstairs without any delay. Squeak, the sound of the door being pushed came into Su Li's ears, and she immediately woke up. She was on the verge of death, so how could she fall asleep? At this moment, she just closed her eyes to rest. Seeing it was Mei Ruhan, Su Li looked gentle and pretended to be relaxed. It's so late. Why don't you go to rest? What are you doing here? I know. Mei Ruhan said, and her eyes turned red. Su Li was stunned, and her smile was more bitter, but her voice was still gentle, life and death are predestined. If you have time to be sad now, why don't you chat with me more? Then I can leave happily. I don't want to. Mei Ruhan shook her head again and again. Suddenly, she stepped forward and grabbed Su Li's pale and slender hand. She whispered, Li, someone said that she has a way to help you. I don't believe her, so. I can only let you judge the way she said. Su Li's eyes burst with amazing light when she heard this. If she could not die, who would want to die? What's more, she still had many things to do. How could she be willing to die like this? But even if she was unwilling, she could only despair and accept her fate in the face of a broken life. But now, Mei Ruhan actually said that there was a way. Who is she? Su Li asked, and the breath of Mei Ruhan in front of her instantly changed. The original pure eyes became strange and horrifying. The incompatible breath could not be tolerated by the world. This change was too bizarre. Even Su Li, who was calm, was stunned on the spot. Mei Ruhan seemed to be a different person. One person with two consciousnesses. How could it be possible? At this moment, Mei Ruhan saw Su Li's surprised face and smiled mysteriously. Senior sister apprentice, I haven't seen you for a long time. You, call me senior sister apprentice? Suli quickly calmed down and slightly frowned. Who are you? Senior sister apprentice, don't be surprised. I am Mei Ruhan, and Mei Ruhan is me. As for why I call you senior sister apprentice, it is naturally because I admire you very much. When we first met, I couldn't help calling you senior sister apprentice. Hearing the explanation of Mei Ruhan, Su Li's heart was full of doubts. Her explanation was obviously a lie. But if she went deeper, she might not get the answer. What is the life-saving method you mentioned? Su Li didn't have too much time and directly came to the point. Mei Ruhan giggled and said, Senior sister apprentice, you are really impatient. But I can understand. Next, I will tell you the method. Please stimulate the Neiguan acupoint of your left hand. It's better to use a sharp object to stab it 1 inch down. Su Li frowned and reached out to take a silver needle from the needle box beside the bed. Then she stabbed it into the Neiguan acupoint. The Neiguan acupoint was not a fatal acupoint. For ordinary people, it could cure diseases. But for warriors, it was a completely useless acupoint. So, she did not hesitate to implement what Mei Ruhan said. But this time, Su Li was destined to be surprised. Soon after the silver needle was stabbed, a pale red halo suddenly appeared out of thin air like a bracelet. It was engraved with complex patterns, revealing a mysterious and ancient atmosphere. What is this? Su Li was slightly surprised. How could such a thing be hidden in a person's Neiguan acupoint? This was completely against common sense. It was not mentioned in any medical books in the martial arts circle and the spiritual circle. Suddenly, Su Li's eyes flashed. She remembered the mysterious old beggar she met on the street a long time ago. He avoided her left hand and left a black pattern on her right hand. That old man also knew the secret. Chapter 257. Buzz, the red ring buzzed slightly and dimmed down. Su Li looked at the wrist that was disappearing, and various thoughts flashed through her eyes. At this time, Mei Ruhan took the initiative to explain, this ring is of extraordinary significance. Not everyone has it. Only those who are born with extraordinary fate are qualified to have it. Senior sister apprentice, if you want to live, you have to rely on this ring. How? Su Li asked indifferently with no expression on her face. There is no other way. Just break it. Mei Ruhan's eyes flashed and she said, I have heard that there is another name for this ring, which is life ring. It is not related to the present life, but the previous life and the future life. Su Li was slightly shocked, but she showed doubt on her face. She mocked, you even mentioned the previous life and the present life. It is really outrageous. Mei Ruhan smiled mysteriously and continued, don't doubt me. Even the existence like me can appear, why can't the previous life and the present life? Your life ring is red jade, which proves that you have a very high foundation in the previous life. If you die now, the foundation of the previous life and the present life will be accumulated again to the next life. If you choose to break the ring, you can not only get the foundation of the previous life, but also the vitality of the next life in this life to maintain your life in this life. Su Li's pupils shrank slightly, and she showed an intention. She stroked her wrist with her palm and suddenly sneered, I don't believe it. If someone can borrow the previous life and the next life, doesn't it mean that he can live forever regardless of his lifespan? If someone has tried this method, how can there be no records in the vast martial arts circle or even the spiritual circle? Senior sister apprentice, you can't find it, but it doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. Mei Ruhan looked at Su Li for a few seconds, and then turned her eyes and said, the world is so big. Maybe someone is using this method to prolong his life now, and the method I said is not perfect. Su Li narrowed her eyes and said in a flat voice, what's the defect? She didn't believe the consciousness that occupied Mei Ruhan's body, but she didn't completely believe it. She just wanted to get information from it, but it seemed that this person didn't mean to cover up the defect. This method is against the harmony of nature, but if you take the initiative to break the past and the future, it will not lead to the wrath of nature. But, there will be a small loss. Mei Ruhan explained very carefully, as if she was sincerely dispelling Su Li's doubts. After all, the foundation is the foundation. It is impossible to inherit all of the two lives. For example, if an old man who is about to die wants to live for 1 year, he needs to pay 2 years in both the previous life and the present life, which is 4 years. 4 times the consumption. Su Li's heart sank slightly, and the idea of calculation flashed through her mind. She was at the peak of the innate realm in her previous life and had a lifespan of 200 years. If she could also live for 200 years in her future life, these 2 lives could only extend her lifespan by 100 years. This was more than a small loss. Of course, Su Li knew that her idea excluded many factors and only calculated the foundation by lifespan. The real algorithm might be thousands of times more complicated. However, even so, if she could live for a few more decades, it would be enough for her to accomplish all her goals. Senior Marshal Sister, are you thinking that even if you add up your previous and current lives, living for 100 years is enough? Mei Ruhan said in a slightly teasing tone with a bit of pity, then you are wrong. What you said is based on a premise. Su Li frowned slightly, what precondition? You can't practice or use Xiangong. Su Li frowned more tightly. It was impossible for her to do that. If she wanted to continue to run the Linli building, she must maintain the identity of Mr. Li. Senior Marshal Sister, the foundation of 2 lives plundered is turned into vitality, but it is also energy. Mei Ruhan raised a piece of thin paper and tore it piece by piece. If the foundation is compared to this piece of paper, every time you practice, you will swallow a part of the foundation. Every time you fight, you will also swallow the foundation. When the foundation is exhausted, you will really face death. Clatter, the thin paper was torn into pieces and fell to the ground. Su Li stared at the debris on the ground blankly. After a long silence, she slowly closed her eyes and whispered, I am tired. You can go out. Mei Ruhan changed her face slightly, but returned to normal in an instant. She stood up and said, then I will leave first. Occupying this body is also harmful to me. I will not appear again in the future. If you want to say something to me, you can ask this girl to pass the message. With that, she left the room without hesitation, closing the door behind her. Sensing the departure of Mei Ruhan, Su Li suddenly opened her eyes, and a trace of sharpness flashed in her eyes. She knew clearly about the previous life. There was only endless misery. The foundation of the previous life was extremely high. It was all a lie. What he said after that was 9 lies and 1 truth. Although he didn't reveal a strong desire, he was trying to entice her to break the red bracelet on her wrist from beginning to end. Mei Ruhan had been living well in the Qinghe province. How could she not listen to Su Li and come to Yunjing City so soon? This consciousness must be in the way. Su Li suspected that this consciousness was coming for her. Even if she was not seriously injured this time, the consciousness might create opportunities for her to face a desperate situation and choose to break the bracelet. Thinking of this, Su Li showed a bitter face and sighed helplessly. No matter whether this person's purpose was good or evil, she was very clear that she was absolutely unwilling to die now. In such a desperate situation, the bracelet must be broken. This was an overt plot. There was only one way in front of her. In the next few days, Su Li had many strange dreams. The people in the dreams flew in the sky and hid in the ground. They were omnipotent like immortals in the sky. But these immortals were not as pure as the gossip in Jianghu. Instead, they became more greedy, cruel, and unscrupulous. In front of these immortals, the vicious behavior in the previous life seemed to be child's play. In the blink of an eye, 6 days passed. Fang Yuan returned to the Linli building and sat on Su Li's bed without saying a word. He completely lost his smile. How could he find a way to save Su Li in just 6 days? Later, Chu Qingning, Fang Mu and others came back one after another. They were all disappointed and speechless. They all came back to see Su Li for the last time. However, after one day, Su Li still lived well, and her face actually became a little ruddy. Is it the last radiance of the setting sun? Chu Qingning was full of sadness and didn't think much. Fang Yuan completely became a block of wood and stood motionless beside Su Li's bed. He and Yin Xuedong were responsible for preparing for Su Li's funeral. 3 days later, all the funeral arrangements had been made. But Chu Qingning was surprised to find that Su Li's pneuma did not weaken, but became stronger day by day. Her face also returned to normal. Compared with the pale and transparent face at the beginning, she was totally different. On the 4th day, Su Li sat up from the bed. She lifted the quilt and got out of bed. All the injuries on her body disappeared. Feeling the internal injuries in her body that healed quickly, Su Li shook her head and waved her hand, "Burn all the coffins and shrouds." Fang Yuan, who stood by the bed, was shocked. His eyes, which were originally full of doubt, completely turned into enthusiasm. Chu Qingning was stunned and then said with ecstasy, "Su Li, you won't die." Su Li touched her wrist and felt the huge and warm foundation of 2 lives. There was a hidden gloominess in her eyes, but she said gently, "For the time being, I won't die." Great! Chu Qingning was so excited that he almost jumped up. He quickly turned around and left. "I am going to burn those unlucky things and tell Xuedong the good news by the way." "Okay." Su Li smiled and nodded gently. Only Fang Yuan frowned. For the time being, how long was it? Good news. Good news. Su Li came back to life. After Chu Qingning transmitted the sounds several times, all the people who had known that Su Li was going to die received the news. They were no longer lifeless and were overjoyed. The ordinary disciples of the Linli building were confused and wondered why the lords were so excited today, as if they had taken medicine. Great, that sister didn't lie. Mei Ruhan was also overjoyed. Her hostility to the other consciousness was reduced a lot. She even called her sister. At this moment, the figure of consciousness hidden in the depths of Mei Ruhan's mind sensed Mei Ruhan's joy and immediately burst into ecstasy. "Senior sister apprentice. Senior sister apprentice, you really broke the bracelet. Ha 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 ha. God helps me." The misty eyes of the misty figure shone. At this moment, senior sister apprentice should be dead and can never be reincarnated. Ha 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 ha. Just for Ling Li, who is not a human being, senior sister apprentice, you are so sad, ha 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 ha. You suppressed me from the beginning. Everything is yours. Now everything is settled. I want the master and the whole sect to know that only I am the eldest disciple with the strongest fate. Ha 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 ha. The crazy laughter echoed in the depths of Mei Ruhan's awareness sea, but no one heard it. After dinner in the evening, Su Li left the Linli building. Her injuries and cultivation had been completely recovered. Naturally, she had to go back to the affiliated school of the National Academy to deal with the trouble of disappearing for more than 10 days. If it were in the past, she would definitely choose to leave by physical movement. But now, she chose to walk. She couldn't waste the foundation of her 2 lives on a meaningless journey. The Linli building was neither far nor close to the affiliated school of the National Academy. She walked for 4 hours to get there. Unexpectedly, as soon as she appeared at the door, she was greeted by Butler Wu, who was full of joy. "Miss, you finally come back. It's so late. You walk alone at night. Aren't you afraid of danger? Next time, even if you know that the medicinal materials are precious, you must bring a helper." Wu Bin kept talking, but Su Li didn't show any boredom. Instead, she nodded with a smile. "It won't happen next time. I will take Yunyi there." "That's good. By the way, Master has been waiting here for many days. Go in quickly. Father is here." Su Li's eyes flashed a touch of complexity. She paused for a moment, but returned to normal in an instant. Then she walked into the room. Lee, you finally come back. I was so worried. Let me have a look. Dongfang Rui held Su Li anxiously and looked her left and right. When he found no trace of injury, he was relieved. After exhorting for a while, he fell asleep tiredly. He hadn't closed his eyes for several days. After the room was quiet, Yunyi came out from the darkness in shock. He stammered and asked, "Miss, you?" Su Li waved her hand and said, "Something happened. Anyway, I am fine for the time being." "Miss, you are blessed by God." "That's great. I am going to tell the brothers to cancel the original plan." Yunyi left quickly. Su Li looked at his back and gently stroked her left wrist. The foundation was as boundless as the ocean, which always reminded her how much time was left. Chapter 258. 10,000 Years. The foundation of 10,000 years. Su Li sensed the depth of the foundation, and her first reaction was that she sensed it wrong. But no matter how she repeatedly confirmed, the foundation of 10,000 years was clearly there, without any change. Just as she had expected, the consciousness had lied to her. Su Li's eyes flashed. According to the consciousness, the foundation of her 2 lives would not exceed 1,000 years at most, but now, it was a horrible 10,000 years. The reason for breaking the bracelet was false from beginning to end. There must be an ulterior purpose for the consciousness to make her break the bracelet. But it was useless for her to regret, and, the foundation of 10,000 years is enough to support me to achieve my goal. Su Li murmured to herself in a low voice. Her eyes were clear. Looking at the light appearing in the sky, she turned around and sat down cross-legged, slowly closed her eyes and meditated. If this scene was seen by people who knew the inside story, they would be shocked and angry and stop Su Li. East-rising purple air was the best time to cultivate. But for Su Li now, it was tantamount to a life-threatening talisman. Every time she practiced, her life would be shortened a little. Unfortunately, now only Su Li knew this secret. As for the consciousness, in order to achieve its goal, it would not disclose it to others. After the morning sun was bright, Su Li opened her eyes. An amazing light with strong surprise flashed from her eyes. She discovered that the speed of her cultivation had increased by a shocking amount. Just the practice of less than 2 hours made the total amount of her genuine energy increase visibly. If she kept practicing in isolation, wouldn't she soon reach the peak of the inborn 9th hurdle and start to break through the longevity realm? Moreover, because of the acceleration of cultivation, the speed of condensing the immortal house also improved. If there was no accident, she could break through the longevity realm in 2 months. It was too fast. It was so fast that it was frightening. Who had ever seen a 17-year-old practitioner of the longevity realm? No one had ever heard of it, let alone seen it. Even in the spiritual circle, it was impossible to see it. While Su Li was puzzled, she brushed her wrist with her palm and felt it. Her heart immediately sank. Although the feeling was not very clear, she had just practiced for 2 hours, but her foundation had been reduced by at least 1 year. 1 year of life, in exchange for 2 hours of practice. Didn't it mean that she would lose 12 years of life for 1 day of practice in isolation? 10,000 years, is too little. Su Li looked indifferent, but her sigh floated out of the window and dissipated in the air. From this moment on, time had stopped for her. How long she could live depended on herself. After a while, Mammy Li called Su Li to have breakfast with Lord Rui. Su Li hadn't had a meal with Lord Rui for a long time. Lord Rui was so happy that he grinned from ear to ear and kept putting snacks for Su Li. In the middle of the meal, Su Li suddenly put down her chopsticks and said, "Dad, accompany me to a place today." Okay. Dad will go with you." Prince Rui hurriedly nodded his head and did not ask where it was before agreeing. As a Wang Yi and a Wang Yi who did not have any real power in the court, he was usually very idle and did not have any other matters to deal with today. Of course, even if there were, Dongfang Rui would immediately refuse to accompany Su Li. His precious daughter was usually too cold. Although she respected and loved him, they were not close. He had no good way to make up for it. Now, Su Li suddenly proposed to travel with him. How could he refuse? Thank you, Dad. Su Li smiled slightly. Dongfang Rui smiled and nodded slightly. But he felt a little uncomfortable in his heart. Why did he feel that his daughter's smile was very reluctant? Wu Bin got the news and quickly prepared the carriage. Yunyi sat in front of the carriage and was about to set off. But he was stunned and asked curiously, "Miss, where are we going?" "The Osmanthus forest." Su Li took a light breath and slowly said 3 words, as if these words weighed thousands of kilograms. Yunyi was slightly shocked. He didn't ask any more questions and set off with the whip. Dongfang Rui sat beside Su Li and felt puzzled. The Osmanthus forest was the burial place of Yun. Now it was not the day of memorial. Why did they go there? Half a day later, Su Li and the other 2 came to the top of the mountain. Dongfang Rui's doubts were finally solved because there was a new grave next to Su Yu's grave. Who is it? How dare they? How dare they set a grave next to Yun? Dongfang Rui was very angry. Before he finished his words, Yunyi gently pulled his sleeve and secretly reminded him, "Master, look at the words on the tombstone first. This grave was approved by Mississippi, otherwise, who dares to build a grave here without authorization?" Was it approved by Li? Dongfang Rui was stunned and immediately looked at the tombstone. When he saw the 2 lines on the tombstone, he was immediately shocked and couldn't help himself. At this time, Su Li had already walked to the tombstone. She knelt down without hesitation and kowtowed 3 times. The grave of Su Yu, the deceased wife. The grave of Su Yu, the deceased son. The grave was built by Xian Jingzhou alone. He used his hands to remove the hard soil and stones and then covered it with mud little by little. Only then did he know that Su Yu was pregnant for a short time. The news came that she died. No one knew how painful he was. Su Li knelt for a long time and said nothing. She heard from Chu Qingning that Xian Jingzhou shed 2 lines of blood and tears. After getting the news that Su Li was fine, he chose to go to Jianghu and left the place that made him sad and crazy. Russell, Dongfang Rui approached and finally stopped behind Su Li. He said in an uncertain and trembling tone, "Is she Yun's elder sister?" Su Li stopped throwing paper money into the brazier. She gently nodded and said calmly, "My aunt died a few days ago." She was pregnant. Dongfang Rui was shocked and speechless. He was inexplicably sad. If Su Yu died, only Li was left in the Su family. No. He frowned and soon thought of something strange. He didn't know that Su Yu died. But Su Li got the news first. Moreover, in the past 10 days, Su Li suddenly disappeared and Su Yu died. How could it be so coincidental? Li, tell me the truth. Does your aunt's death have anything to do with you? Su Li's movements stopped completely. There was a trace of obscure pain in her eyes. After a long time, she shook her head and continued to burn paper money for Su Yu without saying a word. Such a silent attitude made Dongfang Rui firmly believe that Su Yu's death must have something to do with his daughter. His heart became heavier. He knew that his daughter had always been mysterious. Every time Su Li disappeared, she didn't deliberately cover it up. He was not blind. How could he not notice it? If you don't want to say it, I won't force you. But you must protect yourself. You are the only descendant of the Su family. Even for your mother, don't put yourself in danger. Do you understand? Dongfang Rui's low voice came into her ears. Su Li's body was slightly stiff. She threw the last paper money and then turned around. She smiled sweetly, "I know, Dad." I won't let you down. Dongfang Rui knew that Su Li took his words seriously. He was a little relieved and said softly, "It's late. You can leave after worship. Come back on the Qingming festival. I want to be alone. You and Yunyi can go to the foot of the mountain to have a rest. I will come back soon." Dongfang Rui was used to Su Li's request. He nodded and turned to go down the mountain with Yunyi. After they went far away, the smile on Su Li's face gradually disappeared. At last, she became indifferent and cold. Her eyes were like lightning. She looked at the messy and lush grass and said coldly with no expression, "Do you want me to invite you out?" Soon after she said that, the grass that was blown by the wind moved and a person came out. Seeing the face of this person, Su Li was shocked. Her eyes became colder and she said, "What are you doing here?" Ling Li's pale face was stunned. Seeing Su Li in plain white clothes and the hatred and alienation in her eyes, he was more bitter. He said, "I just come to worship my aunt." Su Li's indifferent face was full of sarcasm. She sneered, "Aunt? Why do you call her aunt? Cult Master Ling's skin is indeed much thicker than I imagined." Ling Li's heart ached and his eyes were full of bitterness. She had said the same thing not long ago, but the meaning behind it was completely different now. But, all of this was not what he wanted to happen. Ling Xian was also dead. Su Li killed him personally. Even if he wanted to atone, he didn't know how to do it. After thinking about it, he could only worship Su Yu. But coincidentally, he met Su Li. "I already know the ins and outs of the matter." Su Li, Ling Li was interrupted by Su Li indifferently before he said, "The tomb of the Su family doesn't deserve your worship. Hierarch Ling, please go back." Ling Li's expression changed. He gritted his teeth and said, "Li, tell me what to do, get out." "Su Li, get out." Su Li's voice became hoarse. She looked directly at Ling Li. There was no love in her eyes, but only monstrous hatred and cold ruthlessness. "Ling Li, from now on, you and I have nothing to do with each other. You are not allowed to come to the tomb of the Su family. If I see you again, I will take action." After that, Su Li turned around and stepped away without any hesitation. Ling Li's eyes were red. He shouted in a trembling voice, "Su Li, you obviously like me these days. You said, 'Wait for me.' Are they all fake?" Su Li's body slightly paused, and then disappeared from Ling Li's eyes at a faster speed. A ruthless voice came from afar. "The world is changeable. I don't blame anyone but the natural law. I am not a good match for you. Child Ling, you should find someone else. Everything in the past is just a passing cloud. I have forgotten it." "Forgotten it?" Ling Li smiled bitterly. It turned out that he was the only one who fell in love with her. It turned out that everything was just a play. But he took it seriously. At the foot of the mountain, Yunyi saw Su Li coming. His eyes were slightly red, but he still keenly noticed it. Miss cried. "Poor Madame Su Yu." Chapter 259. After the storm, Su Li's life became calm, at least on the surface. Of course, for ordinary people in Yunjing City, the so-called storm was just the collapse of the old house and the city wall, nothing else. Su Li announced that she would no longer give lectures. She was the only one in the affiliated school of the National Academy, and no other geniuses lived there. Such an announcement caused a lot of uproar. But Su Li was the princess, and she was supported by Lord Rui. At least on the surface, no one dared to refute. The affiliated school of the National Academy became a private mansion, and Ling Li couldn't find an excuse to come in. Most of the time, Su Li practiced in the mansion and rarely went out. In the eyes of outsiders, she was about to get married. The intelligence of the Linli building was sent by Fang Yuan every night. On the day when Su Li woke up, his intention was exposed. Su Li neither agreed nor refused. He had decided to let go of his mind and go further. But Su Li's change during this time scared him away. Yes, scared away. Su Li was cold on the outside but warm on the inside in the past. She had a sharp tongue but a soft heart. But now, Su Li gave him the feeling that she was cold from inside to outside. Her indifferent eyes were no longer mixed with any personal feelings, as if nothing in the world could shake her again. She was ethereal and ruthless, like a lonely fairy in the cold moon palace. Fang Yuan's eyes were filled with endless loss. Although Su Li didn't say it clearly, her back had given him the answer. She would not marry anyone in this life. Who? In the night wind, Fang Yuan leaned against the door and gently breathed out a mouthful of turbid air. His eyes were bright and firm, and he smiled slightly. If you don't marry in your life, I won't marry anyone. I will stay with you. In this way, he was also happy and satisfied. At the same time, in the Ling mansion, Ling Li sat in the wheelchair calmly. Ling Mo silently pushed the wheelchair to the front of Chiu Meng's room. Then Chiu Meng came out and pushed Ling Li in. He stayed outside the door. Ling Mo looked up at the sky. The moon was bright and the stars were sparse. It seemed that tomorrow would be a good day. When he came back, everything was over. Ling Mo sighed in his heart. The death of Ling Xian made him sigh, but it was just a sigh. Although she was also the young master's right-hand man and had grown up with the young master, their relationship was not close. Because he instinctively hated women who were too scheming. Although he didn't understand women, he knew that Ling Xian was not broad-minded. Over the years, Ling Xian had secretly eradicated many dissidents in the cult. Although that kind of behavior was less in recent years, it couldn't change his perception. A few days ago, when he arrived at the destination, he knew that he was deceived by Ling Xian with false information. He immediately returned. Unfortunately, although Miss Su survived, she still made a big mistake. Thinking of this, Ling Mo couldn't help but sigh. If Ling Xian was still alive, maybe the master could exchange her for forgiveness. But now Ling Xian was buried, and the situation was complicated. As long as the master was the hierarch of the Yinma cult, it would be impossible for him to marry Miss Su. But for the sake of the Ling family, the young master couldn't give up the identity of the Yinma cult. This was a dead knot. No one could undo it. Inside the house. Li, tell me the truth. What happened between you and Su Li? Did they quarrel? Quarrel? Hearing his mother's words, Ling Li was full of depression, but he pretended to be indifferent. He shook his head and smiled, "It's okay, mother. I can deal with it myself." Seeing this, Chiu Meng frowned more tightly. No matter what, Ling Li was her son. She watched him grow up. How could she not see that Ling Li was forcing himself to smile? In the past few months, she saw her son go out happily every day. She thought that the marriage was going to be finished soon. But recently, Su Li suddenly announced that she would stop teaching and no one was allowed to enter the mansion. In fact, she was resisting Ling Li. Something must have happened. But her son didn't say it. She couldn't ask Su Li, could she? Immediately, Chiu Meng could only say helplessly, "Son, since Su Li appeared, you have changed your ways recently. You don't go to those brothels. I am very pleased, but I don't want to see you hurt because of love. If Su Li really doesn't want to marry into the Ling family, you'd better forget her as soon as possible." Ling Li trembled slightly, and his eyes flashed with struggle. Forget her, was it possible? At this moment, Ling Mo reported outside the door. "Madam, Master Qinglan is here." Chiu Meng frowned and murmured, "It's so late. Why does he come here?" After a while, Ling Qinglan opened the door and saw Ling Li, who looked haggard. He couldn't help but smile and said, "Aunt, I heard that my cousin is in a bad mood. I finished the case and came to see him." Chiu Meng's eyes brightened. She walked to Ling Qinglan and whispered, you come at the right time. I talked to your brother, but he refused to talk. You two are similar in age. Maybe it's more useful for you to talk to him. Take him back to the east courtyard. Auntie, Qinglan understands. Ling Qinglan nodded slightly and pushed Ling Li's wheelchair back to the east courtyard. Ling Imo closed the door and guarded at the door. Ling Qinglan shook his head helplessly and sighed, I have already known it from Ling Imo. To put it bluntly, I am not used to it when there is no one around you. Ling Li's expression was slightly cold, but his face was still calm. He said in a low voice, it's so late. What are you doing here? Ling Qinglan was stunned. Ling Li's reaction was much quieter than he imagined. A few months ago, Ling Li's performance clearly showed that he liked Su Li very much. Now such a thing happened. He should not let it go so easily. Looking at Ling Li's quiet eyes, Ling Qinglan's heart sank slightly. Maybe it was not quiet, there is one thing I have to tell you. Su Qingtan is out of practice. Ling Qinglan's sudden words really shocked Ling Li. Even Ling Imo couldn't help but turn his head to look. After practicing in practice for more than half a year, Su Qingtan has broken through the inborn realm and mastered Qiyu Xiangong. Now he is waiting outside the east courtyard. Hearing Ling Qinglan's words, Ling Li frowned and said, how much does Su Qingtan know about Su Li? Ling Qinglan smiled and said, he just came out of practice for less than 2 hours and was directly brought here by me. How much do you think he knows? Ling Li's expression changed and his eyes flickered. But only after a moment, the light in his eyes dimmed. Su Li was not an ordinary woman. She was as intelligent as a demon. In some aspects, she was even more enchanting than him. If he used Su Qingtan to restore the relationship, it would only make Su Li farther away from him. Thinking of this, Ling Li sighed slightly and said with a little tiredness, Qiyu Xiangong is the unique martial art of the Yinma cult. From the day you imparted it to him, it was destined that Su Qingtan couldn't leave the Yinma cult. Otherwise, even I can't protect him. Let him come in first. Ling Qinglan was slightly surprised and immediately took a deep look at Ling Li, who closed his eyes to rest. Did he still want to reconcile with Su Li in such a situation? Outside the east courtyard, Su Qingtan's pale face showed some confusion and curiosity. This was the famous Ling general's mansion. Why did Ling Qinglan bring him here? I have really mastered Qiyu Xiangong. My cultivation has reached the inborn realm. No matter who I meet, I have the strength to be confident. Su Qingtan was full of confidence. More than half a year ago, he was just an ordinary man who was not even a senior in Jianghu. Now he directly skipped the acquired 9th hurdle and reached the inborn realm. Since then, he had become extraordinary. He was no longer a soft persimmon that could be bullied by others. In the future, he could also use his own strength to protect his second sister and make her safe and happy all her life. Qingtan, come in. Ling Qinglan's voice came. Su Qingtan was slightly shocked and came to his sense. He did not hesitate to walk into the east courtyard. Compared with half a year ago, his attitude towards Ling Qinglan had changed dramatically. It could be said that at the beginning, Su Qingtan was almost forced to join the Yinma cult by Ling Qinglan. He always had some resentment in his heart. Later, during the time of practicing in seclusion, he got a lot of secret information from the middle-aged guard beside Ling Qinglan. It turned out that his cultivation was exchanged with Ling Qinglan's life. If Ling Qinglan didn't have other opportunities and escaped from death, he would have died long ago. Ling Qinglan's original purpose was to let Su Qingtan take over his position in the Yinma cult. Su Qingtan trusted Ling Qinglan and sacrificed himself. Although Ling Qinglan had selfish motives, it was really a great favor for him. How could he still resent Ling Qinglan? He only had gratitude and admiration in his heart. Not everyone had the courage to sacrifice his own life for others. At least, he couldn't do it. Ling Qinglan, who could do this, naturally won his respect. Creak, Su Qingtan lowered his head and followed him in. His heart was beating like a drum. The atmosphere in the room was very depressing. Well, Su Qingtan, this is the hierarch of our cult. Come and greet him first. Ling Qinglan said lightly. Su Qingtan was refreshed. It was a great honor for him to meet the legendary Child Li today. He raised his head and saw the expressionless young man sitting in the wheelchair. His respectful expression immediately turned into astonishment. He didn't come to his sense for a long time. He subconsciously turned his head to look at Ling Qinglan. The latter smiled gently and said, "There is no doubt. Child Li is the third master of the Ling family, Ling Li." Su Qingtan's eyes widened when he heard the words. He was shocked in his heart. The famous number 1 waist in Yunjing City should be the hierarch of the Yinma cult who was feared in the martial arts circle. How could it be possible? Su Qingtan, greet you, hierarch. Su Qingtan was dizzy and finished the salute in confusion. If it was someone else, Ling Li would definitely scold him. But facing Su Qingtan, Ling Li just nodded slightly and let him go. Ling Mo, tell him about Su Li in the past 6 months. When Su Qingtan heard the name, Su Li, he was shocked. The second sister even got the attention of Child Li. What happened in the past 6 months? After 5 minutes, he heard Ling Mo's words. He opened his mouth slightly and was completely stunned. Chapter 260. An hour later, Su Qingtan followed Ling Qinglan and left the Ling mansion in a daze. What he heard and saw tonight was really a little too shocking. "Lord, we've arrived at the Su mansion." The coachman's humble voice came into his ears, which brought Su Qingtan back to reality from his distant contemplation. He jumped off the carriage and let the coachman leave. Looking at the slightly old plaque of Su Mansion hanging on the small mansion, he sighed with emotion. The Su family had changed a lot in half a year. Knock, knock. Soon after the knock sounded, the door was pushed open, and the sleepy concierge stuck his head out of the door. When he saw Su Qingtan in black, he was stunned at first, and then he widened his eyes and said with joy, "First master. You're back." Su Qingtan nodded with a smile. Anyway, his mother and brother were here. It was his home. The concierge quickly opened the door to let Su Qingtan in, and then he shouted excitedly, "Master, madam. First master is back. First master is back." Really? Many servants were woken up and came out one after another. Not long after, there was a burst of dense footsteps in the backyard. Then Su Huanli, Li Yuelian and Su Qinghao hurried to the front hall. When they saw Su Qingtan standing straight like a pine tree in the front hall, they were all surprised. "Tan! Eldest brother." Li Yuelian stepped forward and grabbed Su Qingtan's hand. She choked with tears in her eyes and said, "What on earth can delay you for half a year? I'm really worried about you." Mother, seeing his mother, Su Qingtan's cold expression became gentle, and he comforted her softly. The woman had never treated him badly since he was a child. No matter whether he was excellent or not, and no matter whether his decision was right or not, she always stood on his side without hesitation. Although his mother didn't like the second sister very much before, she didn't bully her. It had nothing to do with his mother that Su Li left the Su family. Eldest brother. Su Qinghao's eyes sparkled with excitement. In his mind, the eldest brother was his real idol. In just 2 years, the eldest brother stood out from the poor children and became the officer of the Supreme Judiciary. Ordinary people couldn't do that. You've grown taller. Su Qingtan smiled happily and touched Su Qinghao's head. Su Qinghao shook his head awkwardly and complained, "Eldest brother, I have grown up." Su Qingtan immediately burst into laughter. This silly boy was still the same as before. "Tan, it's good that you're back. The family has been in a mess these days." Su Huanli showed a bitter face. When he was about to say something, he saw that Su Qingtan's gentle expression suddenly became extremely cold. I have learned the details from the Supreme Judiciary. Dad, what do you want to say? Su Huanli's face changed slightly, and then his old face turned red because of anger. His son was kind to his mother and brother, but his son gave him a hard time as soon as he came back. You unfilial son. Do you know who you're talking to? What kind of attitude is this? Su Huanli pulled a long face and cursed. Su Qingtan's face became colder. When he was about to take action, another silver-haired old woman came into the room. She was Ma'am Su Chui, the mother of Su Huanli, who was the most senior in the Su family. Ma'am. Su Chui ran fast with a crutch. When she came, she pulled Su Qingtan's sleeve tightly and talked like a machine gun. Oh! My good grandson, you're finally back. If you don't come back, I don't know how my Su family will be bullied by area. As soon as the words came out, Su Qingtan slightly narrowed his eyes and said nothing. But Su Qinghao couldn't help but stand up and refute with full confidence. Grandma. You're wrong. Second sister didn't bully us. It's the first aunt who bullied us too much and asked for it. Shut up. Ma'am. Su Chui's face became gloomy. She scolded Su Qingtan so fiercely that his face turned pale. If he didn't have filial piety in his heart, he would go up and beat the old woman. Not because of anything else, but because she was a complete and utter scum. He glanced at Su Qingtan, who was expressionless. He made up his mind and no longer cared about his mother's usual warning. He snorted and said, "You are actually my grandma. It really makes me feel ashamed." Ma'am. Su Chui was so angry that her eyes turned round. She grabbed Su Qingtan, who was indifferent, with one hand and pointed at Su Qinghao with the other. She scolded, "Bastard! I am your grandma. How dare you talk to me in this tone? How did your mother teach you?" She didn't see Su Qingtan's increasingly dangerous eyes. She continued to pretend to be pitiful. "Eldest grandson, I'm afraid you don't know what happened these days. Your first mother and third sister were harmed by the vicious area. I don't know what kind of suffering my poor little Yen is suffering in the frontier now. Zipei is even reduced to a slave. All of this is done by area, whom you try to protect. Such a vicious girl, you have been protecting her before. Do you know that she dared to rob Zipei's status of the princess? She is really cunning and vicious. If you are still stubborn, maybe she will use you in the future." After the evil girl became the princess, she didn't come back even once. She didn't bring any benefits to the Su family. I am so angry. Ma'am. Su Chui was more and more angry. She beat her chest and persuaded him earnestly. She dared to say that because of her seniority. To put it bluntly, she was taking advantage of her seniority. She was the most senior in the whole Su family. Even if she said it bluntly, no one would disobey her. At least, she thought so. But when she finished her long persuasion, the whole room fell into a terrible silence. Su Qingtan didn't respond. This made Ma'am Su Chui panicked and kept cheering herself up. No way. She was Su Qingtan's grandma. Ha! After a long silence, Su Qingtan suddenly smiled and said to Ma'am Su Chui, "Grandma, have you finished?" Ma'am. Su Chui looked happy. When she was about to add something, the smile on Su Qingtan's face disappeared instantly and became cold. Ma'am. Su Chui, I respect you as an elder. But, who gave you the courage to lie? Do you think that everyone in the world is a fool except you? Then Ma'am. Su Chui's face changed dramatically. She was so angry that she trembled and pointed at Su Qingtan, "Unfilial son, how dare you disobey your grandma?" Su Qingtan's eyes were cold. He shook off Ma'am Su Chui's hands, suddenly staggered and almost fell down. "Because you are my grandma, otherwise, do you think that you can still stand and talk to me? As Su Qingtan spoke, a trembling momentum originated from the inborn realm instantly pressed down. Ma'am. Su Chui couldn't stand the pressure. She fell to the ground instantly. Her wrinkled face was full of fear. Su Qingtan dared to hurt her. This was the Dahan country, which took filial piety as the most important thing. There is filial piety in the book. We should respect the elders, but it doesn't mean blind filial piety. Do you think that you can play with the whole family in the palm of your hand because you are my grandma? Su Qingtan looked indifferent and said, I didn't care about all kinds of dirty things in the Desu town because the second sister didn't want to care about it. Now Zhu Yan and Su Zipei robbed the second sister's opportunity, but you turned black and white upside down. Do you want me to help you to hurt the second sister? Ma'am. Su Chui fell to the ground. Her old body trembled and she couldn't speak. Su Qingtan became completely different after he came back for more than half a year. The filial piety in his heart was no longer an iron restraint. In the past, no matter how angry he was, he couldn't directly hurt Ma'am. But now he did it without hesitation. Qiyu Xiangong. Su Qingtan was expressionless, but he sighed in his heart. After all, it was an evil martial art. It had a little influence on his temperament, but he didn't dislike it. If he really cared about it, he would be more grateful to Ling Qinglan for giving him this opportunity to transform. Otherwise, he would continue to be bound by the indoctrination of the sages of the Dahan country. Everyone, listen up. Ma'am. Su Chui will live in the back 3 courtyards. She can't go out of the courtyard. Except for the daily necessities, no one can obey her orders. If anyone disobeys her orders, he will be expelled from the Su family directly. As soon as Su Qingtan's order came out, Su Huanli's face changed greatly. Even Li Yuelian's expression was a little strange. Only Su Qinghao was happy and clenched his fist hard. He didn't like the old witch for a long time. Now she finally got the punishment she deserved from the eldest brother. Since Su Qingtan became the officer of the Supreme Judiciary, the sovereignty of the Su family fell in his hands. At this moment, when he gave an order, a bold servant immediately took Ma'am Su Chui out. Staying in the backyard and waiting for death was the end of Ma'am Su Chui. After doing this, Su Qingtan glanced at the servants and maids coldly. He snorted and said, if I hear any more rumors about the second sister, you will all be expelled from the Su family. Do you understand? Yes. The servants answered in unison and then retreated with awe. There were only Su Huanli, Li Yuelian and Su Qinghao in the room. Su Qingtan looked at Su Huanli. Although his tone was respectful as a son, it also contained a warning, Father, the Su family doesn't need to worry about food and clothing. It all depends on the byway building left by the second sister. You should be satisfied. Contented people can always be happy. You have lived for so many years. Don't you know that? Su Huanli's pupils shrank slightly. He snorted angrily and left. To deal with Su Li. He was not as bold and crazy as Ma'am Su Chui and Zhu Yan. How could he offend Su Li, who was already a princess? He never thought about that kind of thing. It was enough for him to protect the byway building and make money. Li Yuelian sighed softly and walked to Su Qingtan. There was a trace of appreciation in her eyes. She said, you deserve to be my son. You can distinguish right from wrong. I understand some things, but in order to protect myself, I have to do this. Now you become the person in charge of the Su family. Naturally, you don't need to be so careful. Today, you showed your courage. I am very pleased. Su Qingtan was a little embarrassed by the praise. He knew that his mother was very smart, so he didn't worry that his mother would be prejudiced against him. Well, it's late. You should take a bath and have a rest. Li Yuelian was very tired after a busy day. Soon she went to have a rest. Only Su Qinghao and Su Qingtan talked by candlelight. Eldest brother, the second sister hasn't changed after she became a princess. Except that she is a little busy at ordinary times, there is no obstacle for me to take the fourth sister to play there. It's not like what Grandma said. Su Qinghao wanted to clarify for Su Li, so he said in detail what happened in the past 6 months. Chapter 261. The frost in the early morning of spring was very thick. Both sides of the street were covered with white, and it would not fade until the sun rose. In the room where Su Li lived in the affiliated school of the National Academy, the charcoal crackled, and wisps of heat rose from the holes of the heater, making the room as warm as spring. Su Li wore a thin coat and reclined on the soft couch by the window. A pair of clear eyes stared at the old booklet in her hand. She was extremely fascinated. When the first ray of morning light came in through the window, Su Li squinted her beautiful eyes and put down the booklet in her hand. I didn't expect that after breaking the ring, my understanding has been improved so much. In just 2 days, I have comprehended the 4th hurdle of AO sword skills, and I am not far from the 5th hurdle. She couldn't think of the disadvantages of breaking the ring, and the consciousness in Mei Ruhan's mind would not tell her. So, it was useless to think about how to use the foundation after breaking the ring. She had made some discoveries after studying these days. The speed of practice had become faster. And it was not just a little bit faster. If she wanted, she could break through to the longevity realm in another month. Her current state was more suitable to say, conversion, than to practice. Converting the foundation into cultivation was certainly faster than absorbing the spiritual power from the outside world. Of course, the more and faster she practiced, the closer she would be to death. If she couldn't grasp this point well, it would be useless to have a higher cultivation. The second point was the improvement of the understanding. Su Li's eyes flickered slightly. She had obtained AO sword skills from Jin Cheng AO for a long time, but she always lingered in the 4th hurdle and couldn't enter the 5th hurdle. Although she had some achievements in swordsmanship in the previous life, her talent was still not good enough to comprehend such a wonderful book as AO sword skills. But these defects disappeared after the ring was broken. It seemed that her innate understanding was so enchanting and beyond the cognition. Fortunately, I comprehend AO sword skills based on my understanding and didn't consume the foundation. Otherwise, no matter how much foundation I have, I can't stand the consumption. Su Li sighed softly. If a warrior only had the strength of genuine energy without the means to fight against the enemy, he was simply a waste. A Xiantian second-stage martial artist who only knew how to practice, if he were to encounter a Xiantian first-stage martial artist who had gone through hundreds of battles, then he might not even be able to last one move. Cultivation was one aspect, and martial techniques were another. Only by possessing both could one become an expert of the same level. My cultivation is now stuck at the peak of the inborn realm. I don't know how much foundation will be consumed to break through to the longevity realm. Now it's not the right time, and I don't have to rush to break through. It's better to spend all my time on martial arts. With my terrifying comprehension, I may be able to compete with the longevity realm. While Su Li was thinking, Mammy Li's joyful voice came from outside the door. Young miss, the young master is here. Young master. Su Li was stunned, and then the indifference on her face became gentle. Is it my eldest brother? That's right. Young Master Qing Tan just came back last night and came this morning. Mammy Li's voice came again. A smile appeared on Su Li's face. Let eldest brother wait for a while. I will change my clothes now. Sigh. Mammy Li responded and quickly went to reply. Soon after, Su Li changed her clothes and came to the front room. Then she saw Mammy Li and Su Qingtan chatting casually. Mammy, if you didn't take the risk to find me 2 years ago, I wouldn't know that my second sister had suffered so much. Now the bitterness is over and the happiness is coming. What the young master said is right. Su Qingtan sighed with emotion. Su Li's origin did not affect his love for Su Li, which began to sprout a long time ago. Now that he knew that Su Li was not related to him by blood, he didn't know what his feelings for Su Li were. Eldest brother. A clear and melodious voice suddenly came, which was as sweet as clear spring water. Su Qingtan's heart skipped a beat. He turned his head and saw Su Li in plain white clothes walking towards him. Her temperament was more ethereal than before, and her skirt was fluttering like a fairy descending to the world. Su Qingtan was stunned for a while. He hadn't seen his second sister for more than half a year. Although her beautiful face was covered by the secret skill of nothing unusual, it was still intoxicating. Eldest brother, what are you looking at? The voice was getting closer. Su Qingtan came to his sense and smiled bitterly. Second sister, with your appearance now, I'm afraid that many people will come to propose marriage to you. Su Li squinted her eyes and chuckled. Eldest brother, what are you talking about? No one comes and no one dares to come. Hearing this, Su Qingtan was stunned again. In his impression, his second sister would never say such overbearing words. She became confident and calm. She was no longer a weak girl who had to ask for his opinion. If he compared Su Li to a frightened deer in the past, now she became an elegant white swan, noble and cool. Thinking of Su Li's current identity, Su Qingtan's expression was slightly stiff. He forced a smile and said, Second sister, you seem to have changed a lot in the past half a year. People always change. Su Li pretended to sigh and immediately hugged Su Qingtan's arm. She said seriously, but no matter how I change, you are my eldest brother. Su Qingtan was slightly stunned. He was stunned for a moment, but a silly smile appeared on his face. He nodded heavily. I will always be your eldest brother. At the same time, the strangeness in Su Qingtan's heart faded away. At the same time, he felt a little ashamed. For a moment, he thought that Su Li would alienate him because of her identity. Sure enough, he thought too much. No matter how his second sister's temperament changed, as long as she didn't change in front of him, it was enough. After thinking it through, Su Qingtan opened his mind and played with Su Li for a day. He didn't leave until the evening. Ling Qinglan only gave him 1 day to rest, and he spent all his time on Su Li. Eldest brother, be careful on the way. Su Qingtan's carriage drove away from the affiliated school of the National Academy. Su Li's gentle and cordial expression faded away. She returned to the room. Fang Yuan, who was hiding behind the screen, appeared in a flash. He frowned and said, Su Qingtan got involved in the Yinma cult. Shall we get him out? With the Hongyan house as an intelligence agent, the Linli building knew the situation in Yunjing City like the palm of its hand. Although everything was calm now, the Yinma cult would eventually attack the royal family. If Su Qingtan got involved, he would definitely be in danger. Su Li's eyes were slightly gloomy. All kinds of thoughts flashed through her eyes. Then she shook her head and said, No. Qiyu Xiangong is the secret of the Yinma cult. Eldest brother has practiced it, so he is the core figure of the Yinma cult. Even if Ling Li is willing to let him go, the elders of the Yinma cult will not agree. It turns out that there is such a secret. Fang Yuan's heart sank and he stopped talking. Compared with Su Li, his vision was still too narrow. Su Li worried about many things at this time, but Su Qingtan was not. The current situation was stable. With the help of Ling Qinglan, Su Qingtan was now an inborn senior. His temperament and life-saving ability had been greatly improved. It was not so easy for him to be killed. What she cared about most at the moment was the Wanjian sect. Since the auction house, the people of the Wanjian sect had disappeared. When Ting Shan came back from the Qinghe province, it was unreasonable that there was no movement for such a long time. There were only 2 possibilities in this situation. The first possibility was that the people of the Wanjian sect had left and stopped chasing Wen Tingshan. But for the position of the head of the Wanjian sect, they would not easily give up. Then there was only the second possibility. They were delayed by something. Maybe someone was facing a breakthrough, Or maybe they were facing greater interests. There are few forces in Yunjing City who can help to cover their tracks so well. Su Li's eyes flashed. She said, "Help me to make an appointment with Ling Li as Mr. Li. The time is tomorrow. See him." Fang Yuan was slightly shocked and his face became pale. He couldn't help but ask, "Why do you want to see him?" Su Li turned around. Her clear eyes seemed to be able to see through people's hearts, which made Fang Yuan inexplicably frightened. Fang Yuan wanted to explain, but he was interrupted by Su Li's cold voice. "The Wanjian sect is a great threat. If we can't find him, the Linli building will not be peaceful. The Yinma cult and the Wanjian sect used to have a bad relationship in the spiritual circle. It is a win-win situation to cooperate with the Yinma cult." Speaking of this, Su Li's eyes were complicated, and her expression was still cold. She said, "Because of my affairs, the Linli building should also respond. This is the best time for me to get rid of the relationship with Mr. Li." Fang Yuan frowned when he heard it, and then he stretched his eyebrows. There was an obscure surprise on his cold face. Although he still didn't know what Su Li wanted to do after hearing these words, it was the first time that Su Li explained the purpose of the action to him, so he was naturally happy. Soon after, Fang Yuan left in the night. Su Li looked at the dim night sky and stood in the cold wind for a moment. Then she returned to the room and continued to study the AO sword skills. Soon, the news of the Linli building came to the Ling mansion. Li's affairs happened 7 days ago, and the Linli building responded. "Did Mr. Li make an appointment?" Ling Li received the news and frowned deeply. This matter was full of strangeness. It was too strange. If Mr. Li intended to stand up for Su Li, he should not be so slow. But if he didn't have a deep relationship with Su Li, he should not get involved in this kind of thing, so as to avoid trouble. Ling Qinglan, who came to deliver the news, also looked dignified. He said in a deep voice, "Before, we had always been in a cooperative relationship with the Linli building. We even established a preliminary friendship with the Linli building because of the full moon and heartstrings incident. Now we rely on the Linli building for a lot of elixirs and poisons. If Mr. Li cuts off the supply, our actions are bound to be affected." Ling Li closed his eyes and rubbed his eyebrows. Then he opened his eyes again, and his eyes were shining. "Tomorrow, I will be well prepared. No matter what Mr. Li does, I will take it." You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.